What major injustice are you still salty about years later? In a 5th grade science test, the question was, are there any stars in the solar system? I answered, yes. The teacher marked it wrong. I went up afterwards and said, what about the sun? He said he meant all the other stars aren't in our solar system, and he kept it marked wrong. Although I'm harboring this for 50 years now, he was all around one of the best teachers I've ever had and just passed away a week or so ago. But damn, that should have been marked right. When I was in high school, someone tagged up the school. They announced there'd be a reward for anyone who rats anyone else out. I got called in the office and found out I was suspended for vandalization. I didn't do it and I had no idea who. 4 days later, I'm allowed to come back to school because they found out who actually did it. I just got an apology. Me and some others in primary school were saying the biggest numbers we knew of. Everyone was saying like 100,000 and 1,000,000, and then I'm like 1,000,000,000, and they refused to believe it was a real number. On a 4th grade math test, we had to make a shape that had only 4 sides, 1 set of parallel lines, and only 1 right angle. There were probably more requirements, but I can't remember. I remember almost crying at my desk and spending 20 minutes on that one question while constantly telling my teacher that it wasn't possible, but according to her it was. And the next day we went over the answer key, and the answer had 2 right angles. When I was in high school, I was occasionally allowed to drive my family's 3rd car. It had a slow leak in one of the tires, so we were all supposed to check the pressure and put air in it if we needed to. I picked up a friend to go to a movie, and when we came out, one tire was completely flat. It wasn't the one with the leak, so I put the spare on and I drove home. I got absolute hell from my parents about it. How irresponsible I was not to check it, that I'd have to pay for the repair, why hadn't I called roadside assistance, yada yada yada. Took it to get it fixed, got the whole lecture again as we're dropping it off, and the tech who did it called my mum and told her he'd found a nail in the tire and there was no way I could have seen it coming. She refused to apologize and I still had to pay for it. The good old shut up, I'm an adult and I can't be wrong approach. Jading children and making them lose trust in adults since the dawn of humanity. Come on guys, be good role models and show people how to gracefully accept when they're wrong. Being charged $1,000 for a battery and alternator change. They also destroyed my starter motor in the process and rounded a bunch of my bolts. They left tools in the engine bay. I don't even have that car anymore and I'm still salty. Screw you, Midas. 3 months ago, I went on maternity leave. The woman hired to cover for me was being paid $3 more than I'm currently paid. She was going to be kept on as a full-time accounting assistant after I returned, but she couldn't keep up with my daily tasks and completely effed up several databases that I had to correct when I returned to work the following month. When I returned for a raise, they offered me a 50-cent raise after telling me how crucial I was to the structure of the company. Needless to say, I'm looking for a new job. I live in the EU and English is my second language. In 4th grade English class, I used the word gross, as in disgusting, in a random sentence we had to write. The teacher argued that it isn't a real word. I said that it was, that I saw it a few times in video games and movies, and she said that those aren't a reliable source. I said to her that I'm going to show it in the dictionary, but instead she grabbed me by the arm and took me out of the classroom and locked the door. To this day, I'm still fuming about this. And then she had the nerve to be all chummy when I met her once in the supermarket. Gross. 20 years ago, I had 3 friends show up at my house, and when they left, my wallet with $80 in it was missing. One of the guys felt bad and gave me $20 back. 3 years after that, we were in the Burger King drive-thru, and he whipped out my wallet. I'm still salty. His Facebook friend request has just been sitting there for like 2 years. I came second in a food tech competition. I made a lovely main course, then longue de shot biscuits with lemon posset for dessert. I made this dessert because the judges prior to this day had told us, don't make a cake for dessert. Guess what won first place? A frickin' cake. One time, my high school music chamber orchestra participated in a music competition. We worked our tails off learning Shostakovich's Quartet No. 8, which, if you don't know, is crazy hard to play, not least because it includes a certain musical dissonance that doesn't come naturally to people. And we seriously nailed it. We showed up to the competition only to discover that nearly everybody else had chosen easier, more melodic pieces, with a solid third of all of them playing Tchaikovsky's Serenade for strings. Not only did we not win any of the top spots, several of which went to people playing that damn Tchaikovsky, but our judges were writing notes about how the music sounded evil. Seriously, who marks down a chamber orchestra because you think the composer wrote evil music? Imbeciles. I was probably 5 years old visiting my mum at the hospital after she gave birth to my brother, and she was given food on a tray which she didn't want, so she gave it to me. I put the tray on the table, and as I was eating, the nurse took the tray away from me and threw away the food. That may have been my first true instance of anger in my life. I'm 27 now, and I am shaking mad as I write this. Our wedding photographer left part of their lens cap on, so every photo is shrouded in a massive black ring. No good photos from the wedding. I found a bongo next to the trash at my old apartment, and it was a perfect time capsule of the 90s. It had Grateful Dead stickers, a smiley face holographic sticker, a pot leaf sticker, and an alien. I'm telling you, if someone made this as a prop for a movie about the 90s, I would have told them that it's too on the nose. When I came home from work, the first thing my girlfriend's friend said was, "You're welcome," and I was like, "What?" She had peeled off all of the vintage stickers, and now it was just a boring trash bongo. I'm still mad. Don't touch my crap. My copyright law teacher gave us a case for our pass or fail final exam. I solved the case, we needed to predict the outcome based on evidence, and he failed me. Later that day, I decided to look the case up, and it turns out I was right. When I confronted him, he said the grade was already posted, and even though I was right, he wouldn't do anything about it. I had to retake the class. When my mum put my sister's name on my birthday cake. Later that night, I also walked into my parents getting their freak on. Pretty horrible way to turn 13. I'm still angry. When I was a freshman in college, my mum gave my car to my jailbird brother. Every time he got out, she'd scrape a bunch of stuff together for his fresh start. And she never even ran it by me. He showed up to my school, changed the battery for me, and then drove away in it. He didn't tell me his intentions beforehand, so it wasn't until then that I caught on. As he drove off, I called my mum and she just said, "I'll help you with a new one." He moved out of state with that car, wrecked it within weeks, and has since gone back to jail multiple times. Neither of them have given me a sincere apology to this day. That my 6th grade teacher refused to believe that I had no idea the guy sitting behind me was copying my answers on the test. My father died in a very bad vehicle rollover a few years ago. I wasn't allowed near his vehicle in the tow yard until the cops finished their investigation. That took about 2 weeks. This entire time, the F-wad owner of the yard was charging by the day from day one for storage of said wreck even during the investigation. Was never allowed to thoroughly search his vehicle for the lost heirlooms I believe the tow truck driver might have stolen. The first day of 8th grade, my best friend and friend group informed me that they'd no longer be my friends. To this day, 20 years later, I still don't understand how or why things ended up that way. I can only guess because I was the shy nerd of the group and they were trying to fit in with the cool crowd. Regardless, it was a miserable experience that left me with quite a few trust issues. Well, if there's any justice in the world, then maybe their friends did that to them too. In fact, if they were that shallow and crappy, there's a good chance they were unable to maintain any meaningful friendships at all without a serious amount of personal growth. If they've become better people since then, they'll probably still feel bad about what they did. Kindergarten. Playing with a kid in the sandbox. Was a fairly drizzly day. We're making a castle and there's a puddle a few feet from us. He wants to dig a moat around the castle and I say, sure. So he just kind of jams his hand in the dirt and starts pulling, making way too large of a channel which he immediately realizes is going to just destroy our castle. So I say, quickly, build a dam to stop the water. He freezes, stares at me with wide eyes and a mouth agape before running off. I think this is a strange occurrence, but okay, whatever. I saved the castle, so then I went back to digging when the teacher runs up and grabs me and says to go to timeout, to which I obviously protest and say, no, what the frick, I didn't do anything. She then immediately says she knows I said a bad word and to not try and lie about it, to which I am again confused and say I didn't. After a few back and forths of her trying to pull me away by the arm and me rather violently resisting, it occurs to her to actually ask me what happened. I explain the story. I still remember her face kind of dropping, realizing the other little crap bag thought I said D-A-M-N instead of D-A-M, and then immediately ratting on me. Tries to say, well, maybe use a different word, To which again I vehemently protest against, because no, that's the correct word for such a situation, and that's just how it works, and it's his fault for not knowing the word. Until she finally gives in and explains to the kid that I didn't swear and that nobody likes a tattletale. I am in my 30s and on the other side of the country, and I still remember this as the very instance in which I gazed upon my fellow man and wept, for he is stupid. So my mum and dad got divorced before I was 1, and he'd randomly come around once every few years to pretend to be a dad for a week or two and then disappear again. This is important for the story. Anyway, I've always sucked at and hated math. We got a homework assignment, I think I was in the 1st grade, and we were working on 0 times whatever number. I was excited because I understood it, and I knew I'd get all the questions right. The whole worksheet was just questions asking what 0 times another number was. My father made me show him the worksheet when I was finished and then made me change every damn answer because, wow, you're stupid. Did you pay attention at all in class? And I explained to the teacher when I'd turned it in, and I still got a fricking 0. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Coming second in a school trivia competition 21 years ago. I had the correct answer on 2 questions that would have sent us to the national champs, and I was vetoed by the other 3 idiots on my team. That hits hard. I was a co-founder of a startup, and during an early strategy meeting, I made a bunch of suggestions that the other founders aggressively dismissed. A year later, we got some funding and hired a CEO who was an expert in the field, and he suggested the exact same things, which they praised as brilliant. They later sheepishly remembered that I'd suggested the same ideas and apologized. That really taught me a lot. Being right is rarely enough. You need to understand why you're right, and you have to be able to sell your ideas. When I got my first car, a really old one, my dad told me I'd be responsible for gas money and that he'd take care of the maintenance. After a while, my brakes would make funny noises and I told my dad. I reminded him every once in a week, maybe for half a year, and he always told me, "Yeah, I got it, I'll handle it." My boyfriend at this time wouldn't let me drive it any further because he was concerned for my safety. So my boyfriend, had a mechanic look at it. The mechanic told me that if I'd have come sooner, it would have been a $50 bill to take care of it. But over time, the brake got more and more damaged, and by then it would have been over $800 for the repair. When I told my dad, he just said that there was no way he'd spend so much money on a car that had maybe $500 in value left. I ended up selling my car for scrap. That was 10 years ago, and I still bring it up to my dad sometimes. If he would have ever just done something when I first told him, it would have been so cheap and easy. When I was about 8 or 9, we had a big project in school which ended with us writing a story. I spent frickin' hours on this thing. It was going to be the best book ever. It was only a matter of time before it was snapped up by some publisher, and then it would be the talk of the Scholastic Book Fair. No doubt in my mind. It absolutely had to be in by the time school finished for Christmas, so my teacher could mark it over the break. So I stayed up until about 10 o'clock at night for about a week beforehand working on it, which, is the closest thing you get to an all-nighter when you're about 9. It was my magnum opus. I just got back into school in January to find out that A, she had lost it, and B, she was accusing me of not handing it in, and C, because mine was the only one she couldn't find, she decided to call me out in front of the class about it. I ended up locking myself in the toilet because I was crying so much. Worse still, it later transpired that when it turned up after all, she marked it as though it was handed in late, and the witch still only gave me a middling grade. Screw you, Mrs. Harding. Screw that teacher. In a similar vein, when I was 17 in high school, I was dreaming of becoming a published author one day. I'd always enjoyed storytelling, and I'd always make a special effort to do well in school when it came to creative writing. At some point during the year, our professor asked us to write him a short story of about 1,000 words. I was very excited because I had tremendous respect for that man and I loved his classes. I really wanted to impress him. I wrote a sci-fi short story that involved an ice planetoid turning into a digging site for underground resources. Workers lived in stacked boxes of apartments and traveled in spheres, shooting through a network of large above-ground tubes. The plot involved the protagonist uncovering an artificial structure under the ice, then immediately being fired and sent back to Earth in a single-person shuttle. It was strongly implied that the single-person shuttle was just a way to dispose of workers who knew too much about what the corporation was really digging for. Anyway, it wasn't very good, probably a little derivative. I did consume a lot of sci-fi books and movies and games and things, and it was nothing more than you'd expect from your average 17-year-old. But the professor handed it back to me without even having marked it, asking me to turn in another one on a very short notice, this time without plagiarizing from some popular novel. I told him I didn't. I asked what book he thought I plagiarized, because if a book told that story, I honestly want to read it. I swore the story was purely my own. I even admitted that I was likely influenced by a lot of things, but I still came up with that one organically. He'd never heard my plea, never even named the book or gave me more of a reason why he thought so poorly of my work. I lost a lot of respect for him and a lot of interest in his classes after that. I'm still cranky about it, and it's been over 20 years. I ended up becoming a teacher myself, and the memory helped me remember to never dismiss my students' creativity and always nurture their ideas. I also ended up quitting last year to focus on writing, and I'm now a published writer. I'm somewhat broke, that comes with starting out I guess, but I'm happier than I've ever been. Okay, well good on you for cutting off my curse-laden rant about how bad teachers are stunting young creatives with their unfairness. That last post as professor not even trying to provide proof of your plagiarization is peak unfairness. If he really believed that, all he had to do was put a few of the sentences into Google, and if you'd ripped it directly, it would have come up. I was at a house party in college and we'd taken off our shoes. Some idiot walked home in my leather-high knee boots and I've never gotten over it. For clarity, she left her dirty, cheap plastic heels behind for me to go home with, so thanks I guess, you shoe-thieving wrench. When I was in high school, I entered a book quiz and one of the books I chose was Demon Thief by Darren Shan. During the quiz, I was asked what was the main characteristic of the demonata summoned by the punk during the concert. I said it had 3 heads. Wrong. The answer was that it had a dyed mohawk. Except it was the punk that summoned it that had the mohawk, not the damned demonata. I lost a point because the question setter could either not read, not write, or couldn't remember the book correctly. When my old boss pulled out the 2020 calendar in late 2019 and asked everyone what days off they need so we can plan ahead and around. Everyone was spitting off dates. I didn't have any plans yet, so I didn't request anything until she specifically asked me if I needed or wanted any dates off. I shrugged and asked for one day around my birthday because why not? And she started mocking me in front of everyone. It's just a 23rd birthday, why would you need that off? But okay, obviously rolling her eyes and then started treating me like an idiot for the rest of the day. Ugh. I had a friend in college borrow my truck when I flew home for a month, 1,500 miles away. He agreed to the terms of don't cross state lines, you only drive it to work and back, and if I find out you did otherwise, it's going to be a big deal. I hadn't even been home a week and I got a call from a group of friends that he had taken the truck down to Connecticut, drove drunk, road raged at someone on the highway, and love-tapped the back end of their car. The kicker was that he backed into his buddy's dad's brand new Lexus and caused $3,000 worth of damage. Needless to say, I flew home the next day. When confronted about it, he basically said, "I don't have the money, it's your problem," in front of one of my friends who had picked me up from the airport. That friend had to hold me back. So, I have my mother, the insurance company, and the Lexus guy's dad all climbing down my throat to get me to fix the problem. The dad with the Lexus called me to say he was going to file a police report if I didn't pay. My mother was screaming about the insurance company dropping me. I went to school the next day, got back, and he had vanished. Cleaned out a bunch of crap from the apartment. Stole everybody's things. The one thing that still makes my blood boil is the fact that one of my good friends that lived with us will vehemently back up that crap bag anytime it's brought up. I understand that he didn't screw him over, but just denying it and saying that I need to let bygones be bygones is just something I can't do. In elementary school, there was a pencil machine in the front of the lobby where you could get pencils for 25 cents. There were also special pencils that had stars on them. If you got one of these special pencils, you could take it into the office and get a prize. One day, I decided to get a pencil. I put in my quarter and out popped 2 pencils. And one of them was a special pencil. I went into the office and told the lady at the desk that the machine gave me 2 pencils and one of them was special. She proceeded to say that the machine shouldn't do that, took the special pencil and didn't give me a prize. That was 19 years ago and I am still mad. People like this is why we lie. I missed out on recognition at my school's big academic assembly for arguably the most important academic results one gets in their schooling career, in my state in Australia anyway. I missed out because the teacher I'd sent my results to didn't pass on the news. It's been years, and it still fills me with such exasperation. When my son was in Cub Scouts and it was our first time going to the Pinewood Derby, my son worked hard on his car, and for a 7-year-old, it was decent. We show up and not a single kid built those cars. It was pretty much a dad competition. My son came in dead last, and I was sad for him because his friends literally said that their dads all built their cars. So for the next 4 years, my son picked the design and color scheme, and I built them while at work. We went on a 4-year winning streak in the local, district, and regional derbies. The look of anguish on those fathers' faces was worth it. Sorry, end of rant. Some friends from work planned a get-together at a local chain restaurant for my birthday. One of my co-workers found out and decided that it should also be to celebrate her birthday because it's the day before mine. Already annoyed, but whatever. The night of the dinner, a friend bought us both slices of cheesecake, and they were presented with candles, and everyone sang happy birthday. At the end, she blew out her candle, and then mine, and then laughed about it. That was my candle. You were barely invited. I've never forgotten about that. Ugh. What jobs are you finding it impossible to hire people for, and why? The company I work for is hemorrhaging employees. We caption phone calls for people who've lost their hearing. It requires 2 weeks of training, honestly, it should be 3, and it's a skill that doesn't come easily, but nearly everyone is capable of picking it up. We sit in cubicles and don't interact with anyone, we just listen and caption. They'll basically take anyone over 18. It was a good job when I started a few years ago. The time between calls was enough to study or browse the internet, the pay was pretty fair. Now the idle times have fallen dramatically and the pay hasn't changed one bit. Meanwhile, similar call center jobs are paying more just to read from a script. People quickly get burnt out and they quit. The department in charge of scheduling is a mess. It's mismanaged to hell, and the employees are even more overworked than the captioners. Interactions with them can be shady as all heck, and they're known to go back on their word about time off and schedule changes. They did an employee morale survey just yesterday, and I tore them apart. My sister worked here too for over a year and quit today after being very honest in her own survey. As a night shift employee, my pay is higher and my workload is less, so I'm still doing okay here and I actually like the job. But the day shift is a joke and they'll have to change real quick if they want to continue. As it is, they completely deserve to be struggling like this. The company I work for has been trying to fill a dispatcher position for a year and a half now, part-time, evening shift. They're not offering competitive pay and everyone is suffering for it. Trying to get someone for $1 over minimum wage for a job that should start a good $5 to $7 an hour more is painful to watch. The people we get are either incompetent or they realize really quickly what the job entails and they book it out of here. It's amazing how it never occurs to some managers to raise the compensation when they're struggling to fill a job. The economist Dean Baker writes a lot about this. Basically, he quips that a lot of managers and business owners who complain about a skills shortage are in fact suffering from a shortage of skills, namely their understanding of basic labor economics. One big problem, and I see it echoed in a lot of the other comments here, is that employers don't want to train. Companies just don't want to invest in their workers anymore. They only want to hire experienced people. They don't want to apprentice, and if they do, they don't want to pay for it. They expect colleges to do all of this for them. What I've found is that college can't fulfill this role, even though colleges sell themselves as if they can. College can only teach you basic hard and maybe some soft skills that can maybe get one's foot in the door. If employers want good employees that will stick around, employers need to be willing to train and pay employees well, even in training, and not dole out crazy or unrealistic workloads or an otherwise toxic environment. Training will make them good, specific to your industry and company, and the pay and positive work environment will help them stay. Seems like everyone here gets this very basic concept apart from the people in charge. The narrator has a feeling that we might be seeing a lot more of this sort of sentiment in the answers to come. The strip mall down the street from my work is having trouble hiring security guards who don't sell smack. I'm laughing imagining an interview. I would like to be a security guard. Great, but you can't sell substances. Oh, screw that. People to work in nursing homes in PT, OT, kitchen, nursing staff. I don't know if it's just the company that's having issues, 2 of our facilities are having staffing issues, but we're constantly understaffed and getting overworked to the point where more people are leaving because they're overworked. Management keeps saying nobody's applying, but I don't think they're offering people enough to stay or want to work here. Yep, CNA here. Caregiving jobs are one of the most underpaid professions for what we do. They're understaffed at almost every facility I've ever seen. We have a freaking demanding job. Physically, mentally, emotionally. We wipe butts, clean up all the bodily fluids you can think of, get physically and verbally attacked all the time. We run ourselves ragged on huge assignments, barely get 2 minutes to go to the bathroom sometimes, or sometimes not at all. We get close with our residents and patients, and we bathe them and hold their hands and laugh with them. We're with them when they have birthdays and when they're sick and when they die. We become their family when they have none. These should not be barely above minimum wage paying jobs, but they are. The only way to get good workers to come in and stay is to pay them what they deserve. My first job was as a server in a dining room in a nursing home, and this is exactly what happened. Turnover was so high that by the time I'd been there for 4 months, I was the experienced one. Wound up leaving because we were so understaffed and I was the only one available. I was flunking 2 classes and had to leave to save my grades. Construction manager here. The demand for construction is here, but the workers left during the recession and don't want to come back to repeat history. I'm in this boat. I worked for 12 years as a carpenter and I loved it. Work fell off in 2009. Held on as long as I could, lost my business and my house. Gained 2 kids. Went back to school in 2011 to support the fam. Now I work in IT. No way I'm giving up this salary and benefits. I miss construction so badly though. Despite what employers will say, all jobs are fillable if you pay enough money. There was a CEO a few years ago who wrote in complaining that he couldn't hire welders, and it turns out they were offering $20 an hour. That's a quarter of the going rate for welders, by the way. Keep this in mind when a CEO says, "I can't find good workers." The left-off piece is always, "at the rate I'm willing to pay." My valet company is having an incredibly hard time filling supervisor positions at locations that are slow, and you don't do anything for 12 hours. It's paid $15 per hour. Though part of the reason why it's hard is because they want these people to be educated for some reason. EMTs and paramedics. I've been in the position to hire them, and I can't get anyone, and I know exactly why. Hours. Standard week for EMS is 60 to 100 hours. Many EMTs and medics work more than 24-hour shifts sometimes. The pay is terrible. I have over a decade of experience. I have ACLs, PALs, PHTLs, ITLs, ATLs, and about a ton more Ls, and I can hardly score more than $15 an hour here. Injuries. The work is backbreaking. Lifting people that are 500 plus pounds and the 90-pound cot is a great way to get a hernia. And that 500-pound person you had to drag out of a bathroom. Psychological issues are very common on the job, and the list goes on. It's no surprise people avoid EMS like the plague. Anyone want to be a school bus driver? Good. Do you have a valid CDL? Any DUIs? Criminal record? Oh, okay, never mind. Literally anyone, please. I worked as a school bus driver in a Midwestern state. Got paid just over $100 a day, and I worked about 5 hours a day total. Sounds pretty great, but you only work 180 days per year. Production line worker. No education needed, not dangerous, can listen to music while you work 9 to 5 Mondays through Fridays. $15 an hour starting. They call them unicorns for a reason, but people with both programming and design skills. They're few and far between, but it's pretty much an instant hire if you have both. They really help to bridge the gap between dev and design teams and are almost always in demand. My hospital has a hard time finding nursing assistants. Who knew it would be hard to find people willing to wipe butts for no money? Housekeeping at my hotel. Nobody wants to clean up after the nastiest animals on the planet. Plenty of hours and reliable work to be had, but nobody wants to do it. They should be paid more, I guess. Or people could just be less disgusting. Based on the job ads I've seen, I think they're having a little trouble filling the entry-level 3 to 5 years experience jobs. No, I'm not just playing off the meme. These postings were the bane of my existence when I was job hunting. You should apply anyway. HR always puts that in. As far as I know, it's industry best practice. 2 years ago, I was sent a job posting that needed 5 years experience with Server 2012. My inexperienced friend has that job now. Where the frick are you people posting your jobs? Because I've never seen openings for any of this crap. Well, truck drivers. Most of the people on the road are in their 50s or 60s. They're starting to retire or die. It's even hard to find contract drivers to help on busy delivery days. Just because billion-dollar trucking companies might get automated in the next 20 years, it doesn't mean most companies can or will. That doesn't even touch on the inevitable regulations by the DOT, which will almost certainly require a human hand behind the wheel in the case of an emergency. On top of that, you'll have CDL even if automation does take over. That alone will net you decent-paying jobs relative to other jobs that don't require a college degree. This writer makes a very good point. They'll need someone there as a fallback, and they'll likely end up doing a fair bit of work anyway. Although sitting in a somewhat automated vehicle might mean a wage reduction in the short term, if enough of those people strike when it happens, hopefully eventually it'll balance out. Engineers in general, but specifically structural engineers for aircraft, is always hiring somewhere. A third of the industry could retire any day now. Lead and management roles are aplenty. The job requires keen problem solving and math. Typically, employers want people with high GPAs if right out of college. This is a field where all the bullcrap math and problem solving you did in college matters, and you start to realize that you didn't even scratch the surface of analysis there. The biggest issue is that tons of people are believing the crap that they need a master's to improve job prospects, and all of my bosses pretty much agree that they'd rather 2 years of experience than a master's. Experience is everything in this field, seeing different structures, different problems, different airframes, and tons of ways to solve problems, and pretty much most of the industry has under 10 years of experience. The place I work can't frickin' retain good employees because they work us to death. I make over $50K a year in construction, and these buttholes work us to the bone. They've been in the business, it's a franchise, for over 30 years, and I think they have 3 people that have been there longer than 5 years. In the 2 years that I've worked there, they've gone through damn near 10 or 12 people on my side of the job, and probably 6 people in the office. My buddy is putting in his 2 weeks' notice tomorrow. I frickin' hate it there. I've reached the point where I just don't want to do crap for this company because it's all take on their end. Anyways, construction. They train, still can't retain employees. Dog groomer. On average, they make $600 to $700 per week, but to find one is impossible, let alone one that can groom and manage to be the salon manager. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In New Zealand, we have a huge shortage of competent, qualified carpenters and heavy truck drivers. Funny that it's the older type of trades, it's like they've fallen out of fashion. Mate, they're all doing scaffolding in Australia at the moment. In my experience of heavy truck drivers in New Zealand, there's a high turnaround due to overwork, exhaustion, and being treated like cattle. 70-hour weeks enforced whenever you're in contract breach or no hours. Some sectors are very competitive within themselves to get on site first, to deliver the most loads, to get the best payload. This is a real issue in logging, and drivers often bounce between companies because they get so mad at one that they leave, but then they don't have anything else to fall back on. Trucker rage is not pretty. I've seen fights, logs all over roads, trucks down ravines, air rescue. Truck driving is stressful. It doesn't pay that well unless you own the truck. It means early starts, sometimes being away from family, and all this to be treated like a non-person. My source? I worked in logging logistics, trained others in logistics, and then ran a specialized division of a general freight company for transport logistics. I've noticed that restaurants have a tough time getting servers and cooks, and the food is getting bad at mid-range restaurants, and customer service is horrible. And it's pretty simple why. Making food tends to be pretty nasty. The business is run on slim margins, because of rent, power, ingredients, and stuff, and the only one that they can really cut costs on is labor. At least in America, the minimum wage is pretty far below the poverty line, but even high-class, expensive places might only pay a few bucks over that for entry-level positions. And chefs, managers, and stuff don't tend to move around much, which means you're pretty much stuck there until someone quits. Now, unlike a monarchy, things actually get worse as you go up the food chain. Your pay goes up linearly, but your responsibility doubles or more. If any dish ever goes out wrong, it's on you. If something isn't prepped, you're going to have to do it. Now, waitstaff tend to make more than kitchen staff for less work, mostly because of how tips work in the US. However, waitstaff aren't stuck at crappy places like the cooks are. If you've waited once, you can wait anywhere, but if you don't know a kitchen's layout or rules, you're not going to accomplish much as a chef. In short, once a restaurant stops being an above-average place to work, the good waitstaff leave. The entry-level people stop joining, kitchens tend to have insane turnover, and the whole thing can pretty quickly go to crap. Programmers for industrial environments. It's incredibly hard finding PLCs and robotics programmers that want to get their hands dirty with bigger, complex industrial machinery. It seems counterintuitive, but the problem is most kids just want to do desk programming or handheld electronics, apps for phones or tablets, Windows or Mac, working on PCs or the like, drones, toys, little things. I'm not saying pure software programming isn't satisfying, but seeing machines moving that weigh 10 tons and are the size of rooms because of something you programmed is unbeatable. Teaching jobs. At my school, we've had multiple teachers quit throughout the year and could never replace them, so we just replaced the class. One of our foreign language teachers quit, so they just forced all the students to take French instead, with every class having at least 35 students. I just looked a few minutes ago and we still have more than 10 positions open for the next school year, which starts in 3 weeks. Nurses. Huge supply and demand problem here in the UK. I've also heard there's a huge shortage of teachers in the UK too. These comments were, interestingly enough, written well before the pandemic, which would see immense challenges leveled at both of these professions. As someone who's visited that country a lot, I've always said it's nothing short of miraculous how good the National Health Service is despite how awfully it's kicked about by the various governments in the last few decades. Let's pay them with more than claps. Louisville, Kentucky is a foodie paradise, but there's currently a shortage of restaurant workers. One restaurant group spokesman was in the newspaper as saying something like, "My line cooks can make $17 an hour and I don't have a shortage of workers. Maybe these businesses complaining should take a look at their low wages." I literally went to his restaurant because of that quote. I support common sense. There's a restaurant near me that will tell their workers they'll start at $10 an hour, and then after 2 weeks of working there, they'll get a paycheck that's them being paid minimum wage. When the workers get angry, rightfully so, and ask the managers why they aren't making $10 an hour like they were promised, he'll say, "You have to earn that and show me you're worth $10 an hour." That manager can't seem to understand why people walk out mid-shift with 300 chicken breasts left to pound out. It's perfectly simple to get a job at my company. I just need someone with the wisdom of a 50-year-old, the experience of a 40-year-old, the drive of a 30-year-old, and the pay scale of a 20-year-old. Also, 25 years experience for an entry-level position that will require 17 obscure certificates, a security clearance that we won't sponsor, and a lie detector test. Thank you. My former landlady works in HR for a recruiting firm. She found on multiple occasions that she had to hire people whose interviews were train wrecks and had huge red flags, like large gaps in the work history, talking like 6 to 10 years, no kids, as well as one that had a major problem with a former employee, all because they were fluently bilingual in English and French. These were mainly call center type jobs, sales development type things, not the funnest work, but if you speak French and you need a job, you can find one in southern Ontario. I work at a school for gifted children, and it's incredibly difficult to find a good defense against the dark arts teacher, let alone retain one for more than a year. Yeah, try telling most of these jobs you're a felon and watch them glaze over. It doesn't matter how back on track your life is. Sometimes it doesn't matter how long it's been. I'm employed by a small business simply because nobody else wanted me. The upside? My employer has me on his side through and through. There's something to be said for a guy that hears me out, doesn't judge, and offers me a job. Does it pay the best? No. However, it does pay me enough to help me keep building my life. It's flexible and doesn't demand the frickin' universe out of me while paying jack. Looking at you, food service. You want good candidates. Sometimes, just maybe, good people have skeletons. I'm not an employer, but I work in the AG industry, mostly in packing facilities as an inspector. They never have enough labor. They're always hiring no matter who you are. They don't test for substances, and it's damn near impossible to get fired unless you mess up real bad. Like getting in a physical confrontation with the supervisor bad. And even then the same people will be back next year. I worked in a vegetable cannery for 2 summers. If you don't mind monotony and being alone with your thoughts for 8 hours, it's pretty nice work with reliable hours. You meet quite a colorful group of characters doing factory work. The only person I know who got fired stole a 50-pound bucket of strawberries and was told to never come back. More than 10 years as a headhunter here. If the job pays less than $15 an hour, it will be hard to find talent that will accept that pay rate and not have red flags like large unexplained gaps in unemployment, major spelling errors on their resumes, or even cursing in the interview with me. Seriously, not appropriate for any industry. Once you can pay about $35K or more, the talent pool starts to open up significantly, and you can start seeing more stable work history, good communication skills, and brick-and-mortar college degrees. In short, low-paying jobs are tough to hire for, and applicants applying to them don't care much. Those roles are abundant and easy to get since no one else applies. Basic retail person for specialty chocolate shop. I'm just baffled at how hard it is to get someone for this job. We pay more than most retail jobs in the area. It's the easiest retail job I've ever worked. Customers are 90% nice because who gets nasty about chocolate? We'll teach you everything. You get to dip things in chocolate and make fudge and take home mistakes. We give you free chocolate. I can't even get people in to interview. Out of 20 calls I made last week, I've been trying to hire since March, 5 were the wrong number or out of order, 10 were voicemails that never called back, and 5 were interviews that just never showed up. It's been months of this. What the frick? Not an employer, but accountants. More specifically, CPAs. Sure, there's a lot of us, but the companies I've worked for all have trouble filling open positions. Most use recruiters who charge a month of the position's salary if the person gets hired. Basically, it's a case of demand being much higher than supply. That's probably why my accounting graduating class had a 99% job placement before graduation. I haven't seen web developers or programmers or software engineers yet. Lots of good coders out there, but open seats want client-facing, full-stack, MVC, Angular, Sitefinity, MonGodb, Swift, and a glittery unicorn. Tenors who can sight read and sing in tune for paid positions in professional vocal ensembles. I wonder if there's a greater or lesser supply of these than in the mid-20th century, to be honest. It feels like younger people in choir, musical, and orchestral pursuits are just much fewer and further between in modern times? Or is the talent pool just that good at honing in on the best jobs? While more and more people are realizing how awesome getting into coding and programming can be, there seems to be a significant lack of individuals who are capable of critical thinking on top of programming. You'd think the two would go hand in hand, but they don't. Alright, so a lot of people are asking me about coding and being taught and stuff. The best way to code is to be a self-starter. Pick a language, grab a book or 3, and work through them. As with any skill, with enough practice you can master it, and coders come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Almost every secondary part of SKEET, skill, knowledge, expertise, education, training, can come into play when you code, from having an artistic background to theatrical arts to physics or math. The first coding language isn't relevant. Almost every language has a syntax that's fairly similar. While there are obviously differences between the languages, that's why they're different, learning one can lead to picking up others very quickly. Study. This is not a walk in the park per se, but with dedication you can do it. There's a bunch of great online tools to get you started. Critical thinking. Thinking critically isn't just about your ability to use logic. Logic and programming flow fairly naturally together. However, thinking critically is nuanced, and every role will force you to think differently each time. Problem solving is huge, time management is huge, and putting those together is massive. It's more important to fix this bug than it is to develop this feature, stuff like that. Pluggers. There are many jobs where I can just code without having to think, say a lot of people. Sure, we call those pluggers because they just plug away. Plugging can be useful, and they have a role, but it's usually not what we hire, as we want individuals who have their own thoughts and who push back on ideas and come up with their own. I would also suggest that this would get very boring for the plugger, but everyone has their own tastes and what they can or can't handle. And jobs? I'm getting a lot of questions on how do I get into a role like that? Do your own apps, build your own ideas, and again, open source projects. Join projects others are in that are open source, contribute and get feedback. Read books on critical thinking and common problems in software. Thinking Fast and Slow is a great example of a book I'd suggest anyone read. How did you get below rock bottom and then make your big comeback? My very first semester of college, I got pneumonia for the first few weeks. A week after that, I got a yeast infection, a very painful one too. Then I fractured my wrist a few weeks after that. Then, after I'd been home for Thanksgiving for a week and had to go back and finish the last 2 weeks of the semester, I thought, well, can't get any worse, and I was hit by a car a week later. Going into my last year of college, had some troubles with mental health after all that, but I'm figuring it out and I'm happy with where I am currently. My older brother passed away shortly after I found out I was cheated on by my girlfriend. All while I was homeless and slowly losing the use of my left leg due to illness. Then I got the news my innocent, autistic little brother got cancer. He's been in remission for a while now. Current biggest worry is about Batman or something. He's a great kid. I quit smoking cigarettes, green herb, and taking Oxy at the same time cold turkey with no help. My mental health deteriorated pretty fast. I felt like I really lost my mind for good. Took me a year to recover and feel relatively normal again. Every month that goes by from then, I feel better and better. Time was needed, I guess, for my brain's chemistry to balance. I still have the occasional craving for cigarettes. Not enough to restart, but when I see people enjoy their smoke, I sometimes feel so much envy. I don't miss the Oxys at all, though. That crap is dangerous, and I'm happy that I stopped. I was homeless at age 18. I went to a homeless shelter despite warnings from some shady-looking guy. I got treated like crap, made fun of and belittled, and had my backpack with all of my important documents stolen. All this was by the shelter staff, by the way, the people who were supposed to help. I still don't donate to any homeless shelter. You don't know how they're really like until they're your last hope. After that, I sold my cell phone, bought a tent, found a backpack and a garbage can that reeked like cat pee but was otherwise clean, and did my best to not starve while going from place to place. My tent got stolen eventually, but luckily nobody took the backpack. I also got a revolver at one point. I recovered by getting unbelievably lucky and having my uncle find me and take me in and even give me one of his old properties in exchange for fixing it up real nice so he could sell it when he retires. If it hadn't been for that, I would have self-deleted after that first snowfall. I was even saving a bullet for it. My girlfriend left me for my best friend. Then they kicked me out of the house that I was paying rent for. Turns out I was never added to the lease. Then they all stole my stuff by not allowing me near the house. I became homeless with just the clothes on my back. I was sick too. It was great. I worked my butt off to get an apartment, go to college with no student loans, and get a good job. This is definitely going to be one of those check your privilege videos for some of you, and for the narrator as well. I've been desperately poor and nearly thrown out of housing before, but never crossed over that line to homelessness. I guess there's still time though. Well done for getting back on your feet, commenter. I was sick of my job, and one of the few redeeming features, my closest work colleague who worked for me in a team of 2, left, for entirely unrelated reasons to me. We're still friends. After a long time just feeling very alone, I split up with my long-term ex, who owned the house we both paid towards, and I moved out. Moved into the only flat I could afford in a quiet street where nobody would really know if I was coming and going or not. Literal assets to my name at that point were a car, a handful of personal possessions. I took out a loan to buy the most basic furniture and appliances, kept everything extremely basic, hoping to move out ASAP. I'm an absolute introvert, no friends. I perform the bare minimum for family to stop them moaning, but otherwise I keep away from them all. I can easily go a year without seeing anyone outside of work. I don't even know the neighbors' names, but they complained several times when I first moved in about all kinds of made-up crap. Turned out that after bills and things, I had a pittance of money each month to do anything with, and nothing approaching luxury. Minimal shopping for food, clothes, and stuff for months on end. I kept the new address from everyone for as long as possible, even my employer, deliberately. I figured it would take several weeks for anyone to find me, and if it did it at the right time of year, it would only be my employer who'd notice I wasn't there first, and then try to trace back, which would be tricky without police help. Started writing something to explain it all, and at the bottom of the page I had a set of boxes for all the people I wanted to say something to. After a few months of trying to finish it, there was still nothing in any of the boxes. It was a small list of names of people who might notice and might be a little sad, but nothing in particular to say to them. I deliberately started spending time with those people, in case it was the last, and even found myself leaving them on, well, not quite a speech, but saying something they'd be likely to remember if they didn't see me again afterwards. But I worded it so it wasn't seeming unusual at the time. Which worked, by the way, nobody ever suspected. A year later, I'm still there. Not quite as rock bottom as I was then, but not much better. Made a set of deadlines for if it's not improved by X date for when I finished paying for certain things, and having some spare money. I had a couple of little free, cheap holidays with some of the people on the list. Again, always thinking, in case that's the last time, because I don't see those people that often. A 3-week vodka binge. I woke up in the hospital in restraints. It could only get better, to be honest. My girlfriend cheated on me, my uncle died in a house fire on Christmas, my cousin was shot 30-something times because he was in psychosis and tried to take a car. I watched my grandpa slowly wither away from a rare disease in his abdomen, failed all 5 classes that college semester, tried to end things but couldn't figure out how I'd self-delete, so that ex that cheated on me called the police, so I got charged for having alcohol. There was no miracle turnaround in the end, but I'm getting back to normal slowly but surely. I tried to not be alive anymore. I got caught at the right time by my mum. She broke down, told me it was all my fault and I was shaming the family name by taking the easy way out. I ended up staying at the hospital longer than necessary because my mum needed an excuse. I started planning elaborate ways to no longer be among the living and making it look like an accident or from a disease, an end that won't shame my family. I caught a bad case of tuberculosis. Laying in bed, I got a deliriously good idea. Start throwing up whatever I eat or drink. Take meds on an empty stomach. Take extra pills or take no meds. Having a weak stomach, now I'm coughing up fresh blood in the bathroom or wherever. I hide them away. Say that I'm taking my meds, nobody figures out. Go to bed one night, wake up in the hospital. I'm too weak to speak. I can't make much sense, but I somehow feel disappointed. I see my best friend beside my bed. She's crying her eyes out. Sees me, still crying. She says she knew I'll survive battling this disease. She says she wouldn't know what to do if I died. Continued to say many things that I've forgotten about. I feel like I've betrayed her. I'm crying with her. Long story short, I crawled out of the basement of rock bottom thanks to my best friend. Mine's still ongoing, but I overcame a substance addiction and major depression and found my dream job. Well, old mistakes came back to haunt me and led to an arrest and 1 month in jail after having had a baby 3 months prior. I was facing years in prison for a first-time offense when I got home to find out my dear husband had cheated while I was locked up. Then I lost my home and struggled to find work when I'd previously been able to find really good jobs. I'm finally working, but definitely not my ideal choice, and I'm still dealing with my case. I'm still hoping to recover from it all. I went to my dealer's house to score some smack. He lived in the basement of his grandma's place. Her entire place was decorated in pure white frilly pillows with Jesus' face on them. I hadn't gone twosies in like 3 days, and while we were waiting for this guy to arrive, we smoked a cig, which loosened up my bowels nicely. I took a number 2 in his grandma's bathroom, and in my borderline withdrawal stupor, I didn't realize that the toilet hadn't flushed completely. Flash forward a half hour to when the good stuff arrives, and we both get higher than God's left testy. I always smoked my smack off tinfoil, and it always made me throw up. So, I stumble my way back to the Lutheran toilet and yak my brains out. I go to flush, and it's clogged. But I'm gawked to high heaven, so I figure if I just flush again, it'll go down, right? Nope, not right. Anyway, I flushed like 3 extra times, and then it all came right back up. So my friend hears what's happening and comes running up to see what's wrong while I'm standing on the edge of the tub, while everything that had been in my stomach for the last 3 years came raging up out of the toilet. He started screaming that he's going to kill me, and I'm pulling a bunch of white, lacy towels off Grandma's bathroom wall. In the end, I used 6 or 7 towels, all with angels or Jesus' faces on them, to soak up my mess. I didn't quit using substances for another couple of months, but I never saw the aforementioned dealer again. It was definitely the lowest point of my life. In short, I flooded my dealer's grandma's bathroom and had to use her Jesus-approved towels to clean everything up. Yep, that's a definite low point. That poor old lady. I'd be fairly sure that you either got your dealer thrown out of her place or saw him in some pretty hot water afterwards for a while. Maybe you even had the knock-on effect of making him reconsider his life choices, but I guess I shouldn't hold my breath. My daughter went into sudden respiratory arrest when she was 2 months old. Day 9 of ICU, I got a call that my older 3 kids were in a bad car accident with their dad, and I don't know if they're okay. Fortunately, they walked away with only mild concussions, and my baby is preparing herself for kindergarten and is healthy as can be. I'm so lucky and blessed. About 7 years ago, I went to get £10 out of the cash machine to buy a train ticket home, and I couldn't. I had no money. I know that's not that bad, things could be worse, but that's the only time in my life I've had 0 money, and I felt awful. Luckily, a great man at work loaned me £100 and wouldn't even let me pay it back when I tried to. So, I got 3 misdemeanors and became homeless. Figured that was rock bottom. Had an upswing, got married, only to go to a festival and acquire medication-resistant skin mites. Took several years to get rid of them. They also left me with a residual skin condition that seems permanent, that doctors don't understand and can't treat. You don't really recover from stuff like this. What I did do was learn to compartmentalize my feelings, learn a ton of self-discipline, and become a way stronger person. Now I'm a full-fledged adult with a skin condition who's recently picked up painting again, has started writing, and is learning coding. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. After my stepdad passed away, I didn't really see my mum for 3 out of the 4 years I was in high school. 2 years I lived with her, she'd take off for weeks sometimes with no warning, and the other 2 I got passed to various family. When I was 19, I was supposed to finally move back with her when last minute she sent me to live with an aunt. The aunt's husband just opened a bakery, so I worked in the bakery doing cashier, stocking the front, dishes, making the coffee, cleaning the front entirely, and frosting the donuts. He did nothing except bake. I worked 70 hours a week from 3 a.m. to as late as 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and worked blockbuster 2 of those days until 10:30. I was sleeping 3 hours or less most nights, and he'd pay me approximately $1 an hour as payment for me living with them. I slept on their couch and had only a week or 2 worth of clothes with me. Eventually, my body started not being able to keep up the pace, and in the third month, when I pointed out the sink was leaking, he asked me why everything broke around me and why I was so useless. I responded with, "I don't know, maybe it's the same reason you're a butthole." So I got kicked out, and I took months to recover because I was anemic and seriously exhausted. I ended up living with a friend, but I didn't make a lot, so I was living off noodles, water, and rice for months. In that time, I started dating a guy who ended up treating me really badly, and when I finally got the courage to break it off, he stalked me at work. The cherry on top was my estranged dad and I had started trying to build a relationship again, and he emailed me that I wasn't even his and I was the reason that my parents divorced. I did move back with my mum after that, and our relationship fell apart at the news that I knew about my dad because she thought I should hate her, and I didn't. She'd pick fights so bad I'd get bouts of IBS and have to miss work because I'd throw up for 6 hours so violently I'd pull muscles in my back, abdomen, and neck. At that point, I worked full-time and paid $600 rent to my mum for a 10 by 10 room with no privacy whatsoever. I'd never had a substance use issue, but she'd barge in without knocking just because she could. I wanted to throw myself in front of the train every day on the way home from work so I wouldn't have to go back to my mum's. Eventually, I had friends who knew I was doing badly, and it was getting scary, and they offered to let me move in with them. I cried and said yes. They helped me get my license and my first car. My mum and I since have mended our relationship after years of talking about it, and she finally understands more about how I felt. My aunt divorced her horrible baker husband. The bakery failed because he was lazy and didn't have people skills, and I'm doing much better now and have a much stronger support system. I just started therapy again. I even have a boyfriend who I've been with for 7 years who stuck by me while I worked through my trauma and issues with my past mistreatment by others. I still have a rough time, but I'm glad I'm still here. I was homeless when I came out of rehab, then I spent 6 months in a halfway house. I worked pretty hard to get a 1-bedroom in a share house in the city near me. While living with a group of strangers my age, I had a massive relapse and psychological episode which led to my telling of horrific and manipulative lies. Ultimately, I ended up in ICU for 6 days with internal bleeding. After quickly having to look for a new place, I checked into an intensive outpatient clinic that had a strong focus on dual diagnosis and therapy over the AA God model. It took years of continued treatment to get me properly medicated and as healthy as possible. It's still an ongoing battle, but I have much better tools. I remember sitting in my bedroom at 2 a.m. trying to make myself start the 10-page research paper due the next day and just feeling like life was impossible. I remember looking around the room for something to end things with. This was while I was on antidepressants, by the way. Somehow I managed to not end things then and there, but instead stumble into my roommate's room, wake him up and ask for help. I then lost control and started wailing and crying. He handled things surprisingly well. He went and talked to my professors the next morning and asked them to give me extensions. I ended up failing one of the classes anyway and almost failing the other. After that, everything changed. I learned how to take care of my mental and emotional health and never got to that point again. Later on, when I was doing a lot better, he became pretty depressed himself and would literally spend the entire day in bed. Then it became my job to encourage him and motivate him. He almost slept through a final exam, and I convinced the professor to let me leave, go home, and wake him up. So I kind of paid him back, I guess. Good on both of you. Friends make all the difference in the darkest periods of our lives. The narrator mentioned before that he was pretty poor and nearly out of home for a while. Well, that might have definitely crossed over the line if I hadn't had such great friends helping me out. Look after your nearest and dearest, folks, because with any luck, they'll do the same for you anyway. Caught my controlling, substance addict boyfriend cheating on me a few nights before we were both supposed to move into a new apartment. He raged and chucked me out of both apartments. I stayed with friends and at shelters while working 3 jobs to get back on my feet. Had a hard time finding housing. I was struggling with PTSD because not only did he turn on me, the entire community I'd built in the time I was with him did too. Even my own friends. Women were coming to me for months afterwards with confessions. I was also trying to stay sober during this time. I had nobody, was estranged from my family, wanted to just not be alive anymore. Eventually, I found housing with one of my remaining friends. I adopted a cat and worked really hard to replace all my furniture. The apartment was crap, but it was the first place I'd felt safe in years. Fast forward 2 years, I'm still working a lot, but I live in a much nicer place now. I have better friends and don't suffer with PTSD so much. My ex's actions still haunt me, but I'm a lot stronger and trust myself and my instincts more now. And I'm still sober. My husband lost his job and insurance. I kid you not, the very next day he broke a rib and had to go to the ER because he didn't know what had happened. Apparently, you can break your rib by sneezing really hard. 2 days later, I had to go to the ER for a kidney stone myself. The ER thought I was seeking addictive painkillers because we'd just been there with my husband, even though that first time we'd refused medication because he didn't want it. So they sent me home. Of course, this wasn't free, and they were really mean about it while I was trying to take severe pain like a champ and not cry because no one believed me. The next day, I'd thrown up so much from the pain that I'd damaged my esophagus and started throwing up blood as well. My throat felt like it was on fire and I couldn't breathe properly. We Googled it and every website said, "Get your butt to the ER," so we reluctantly went back. I won't go into that experience, but we basically had to beg the staff to see me after I'd laid on the floor outside the triage, in and out of consciousness for 6 hours. After they finally told me what had happened, they sent me home. I was still chucking up blood and in horrible pain from the kidney stone. It didn't get better. I didn't want to go back to the hospital after they'd failed to help me twice in the same week, so I went to urgent care instead. They said they weren't equipped to deal with my problem, but I told them what the hospital had done and begged them to try. They gave me an IV, pain medication, anti-nausea medicine, and a couple of other things, and frickin' finally, I was able to go home and recover. And then the hospital bills started coming. The hospital didn't do anything to help my problem, but 5 years later, I'm still paying for it. I can't remember how much it cost because it came as a series of separate bills, but probably about as much as our house all said. In short, got real sick the day after our health insurance expired, still paying for it. Proud to be an American. It was the depth of my eating disorder after starting a really crappy internship in the worst apartment I've ever been in. My landlord was a smackhead who wanted me to sleep with his friends. My roommates were two much older, creepy men. My workplace often had fires on the warehouse floors and didn't refill their fire extinguishers. And to top it off, I was going through withdrawal from my depression meds because my psychiatrist refused to do anything but raise my dosage when they didn't work, which was always, and my parents said I was slurring words now. The basement of rock bottom was staring at every single one of my ribs in the mirror in that crap hole, having not eaten for 4 days and being dizzy from withdrawal, crying because I knew I was worthless and still needed to be thinner. How did I get out of it? Time and luck. I started forcing myself to eat something every day. I left my job a month early to spend time with my friends and family, got a prescription for a different medication and started that. Went to a cabin with my best friends and focused on nothing but having a good time for a week. Moved from that sketchy apartment, started university again, and had to eat to think. Relapsed a bit along the way, but I finished the term. Then I started a new internship and discovered a group of people and an industry that I loved. And after 4 attempts, I finally found a therapist that I clicked with and have been working through my issues with since. I'm not out of the woodwork yet, I don't know if I'll ever be, but I'm at the edge looking out, and that's so much better than I ever imagined. Just over 5 years ago, I was homeless, in active addiction, and others were deciding if I should go to prison. Then the universe decided to show me that hell does in fact get deeper, and took my fiancé from me when he took too many substances. I decided I had no idea how to live life and started taking advice. I let other people help, no matter how much I hated their solutions. I went to treatment, did what was suggested, I got clean, and slowly, very slowly, learned how to take responsibility for myself. I started making the right choices, no matter how hard they were. Today, I have the career I always wanted, with money in the bank. I'm married to the love of my life, and our relationship is better than I ever knew was possible. We have a beautiful 6-month-old baby boy who has my blue eyes. Friday, we bought a house that we're in love with. If your life is a mess, it's probably not everyone else's fault. You should probably stop thinking you have the answers. Let go of the past and take responsibility for yourself. No matter what's happened to you in the past, it's still your life to live and you are responsible for it. Believe in yourself because your belief is the only one that can change your life. First, my dad died. Next, I learned my girlfriend cheated on me while I was at his funeral. Then I was on the verge of flunking out of college. Then my mum was falling so deep into depression, and my sister thought she might self-delete. The only reason I can explain how I got out of this depressing circle of hell was to just buck up. Nobody's going to help you. You need to find your own way out and put the pieces back together the best way you can. What's the most interesting mental disorder you've come across? Medical doctor here, neurologist. Capgras delusion. The patient is convinced that a family member has been replaced by an imposter who's completely identical. For example, the patient will tell you the person sitting across from them looks exactly like their spouse, sounds exactly like their spouse, has all the memories of their spouse, but that's not actually my spouse. and the patient oftentimes isn't overly distressed by this imposter. In 20 years, I've only seen this condition twice. I was also going to write about Capgras delusion. I had a case a few years ago. In this instance, it was a mother who was under the false belief that her son was a clone. We had some success with atypical antipsychotics, and I helped her focus her energy on being a good mother to the kid, whether it was hers or not, because she could agree that the child was innocent and needed a loving home. Family support was also crucial. A psychologist here, not someone I worked with, but I did observe someone with alien hand syndrome. The patient's left hand would stroke her hair and pat her face, but was not under her control. Each episode would last about 20 minutes. Turned out the cause was a tumor. Amazingly, it didn't seem to cause her any distress. I once worked with a guy whose voices were positive, like a cheer squad. So instead of, "You're useless, no one likes you," his voices said, "You look amazing today, people think you're charming and funny." It wasn't great though, despite what you'd think. He has enough insight to understand that they were as much a hallucination as if they were giving negative messages, and he felt this crushing, overwhelming pressure that he couldn't live up to the incredibly high standards set by his voices. It was quite crippling for him, really. As much as, if not more so, than if the voices were negative or even benign. Foreign accent syndrome is rare, but absolutely fascinating. Yes, my parents have a friend, Native American, never left Canada. Got into a bad fight one night and got her head rocked pretty badly and was knocked out. When she regained consciousness, she had an English accent, and to this day she still has it. I know a lady who hit her head while using a trampoline and started talking with a deep German accent. She still has the accent, but went to a speech specialist to learn how to speak with an American accent to get her old voice back. Maybe if I knock my head hard enough, I can get an accent that will stop confusing our viewers as to where I come from. It's tempting, but I also like having brain cells, so I'll hold off for now. Mental health counselor here. The interesting one is schizophrenia with visual hallucinations. Most people with schizophrenia have auditory hallucinations. I didn't realize how much more unsettling the visual ones were. The client I had with this disorder used to see me and other people he knew. He called me up once, yelling at me for coming into his apartment early in the morning. Even if I told him otherwise, the experience of seeing me is very real to him. I can't imagine seeing people in my own home, especially at night. That would freak me the frick out. Lawyer here, I did about 10 years criminal law. I've had many clients with schizophrenia. Auditory hallucinations must be disconcerting and terrifying. Visual would also be awful, but the oddest one I've come across was olfactory delusions. Client who had a psychotic break and had a range of hallucinations telling her to hire a car and drive across the country ASAP. She was arrested doing 180 kilometers an hour through a country town. The speed limit was 60, on a major highway. When I came down to see her, she was obviously unwell, but she also kept sniffing my hand anytime I asked her a question. Later, when she was well again, she explained it to me. She remembered everything, even though she had no history of mental illness prior to this time. Everyone bad, i.e. all of the police officers, smelled like rotting corpses to her at the time, but I knew I could trust you because you smelled like sunshine and flowers. This stopped along with her other hallucinations when she came out of psychosis. I never knew before then that delusional smells were also possible. Early on in my career, I worked at a planned community that functioned as a partial hospitalization program. One of the residents would bring magazines and newspapers he'd found to the main office floor every day. Sometimes he'd be upset, sometimes overjoyed, depending on the stories, because all of them were about him. I've never worked with someone with such delusions before or since. One day he was Michael Jordan offering to buy us cars. The next day he was the leader of the people behind September 11th trying to hide with us. He'd read his obituary, his wife cheated on him in a political scandal, he'd surveyed the Congo. We restricted and sorted his mail after the incident where he thought he was that terror leader, but he'd just find magazines through other residents or in the community. Phantom pregnancies are pretty fascinating. A woman can be so convinced she's preggers that her periods stop, she gets all the classic symptoms, and her belly might even grow. Nobody is totally sure how this happens. It's suspected that Queen Mary Tudor, or Bloody Mary, experienced multiple phantom pregnancies. In one case, she went into confinement at around 8 months and didn't leave until the 11-month mark, when it was clearly obvious there was no baby. It was probably the most humiliating moment of her entire humiliating reign. Her husband abandoned her, both the court and the people she thought she'd lost her mind. Bear in mind that she was likely too old to conceive by the time of her marriage, and her constant illnesses from a very young age over the stress about her mother and a bit about her father. There was no way she would have been able to have a normal pregnancy. Also, share psychosis is pretty crazy. There was a case a few years ago where twin sisters visited each other. One was mentally ill and the other one wasn't. And the ill one went into a psychotic state, and then the healthy twin suddenly, for no reason, went into the same state. They threw themselves into traffic multiple times, getting hit by trucks. After being separated at the hospital, the healthy twin snapped out of her psychosis and was fine. The other one stayed in her psychosis and ended up killing someone with a hammer, and neither of them remembered anything that happened. One of my old friends worked in a care home for people with various severe mental health disorders. One of the clients, lovely guy, pretty easygoing by the standards of that institute, had a rock-solid delusion that he was CEO of the company, and the reason that he was there was some sort of CEO check-in on that specific house. He'd basically gently chastise all the workers for their jobs or congratulate them if they'd done something correct. He'd talk about promoting people, stuff like that. It was always fun to hear the stories about that guy at the end of the day. My mum was losing it towards the end, plus she was finally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She also had hallucinations. She was insistent that she worked for the care home she went to before hospice, and she'd tell us that her job was terrible there and didn't pay enough. She thought I was the nurse a couple of times before when she was staying with my brother. We pretty much went with it because it would make her upset if we didn't believe her. So I'd just listen like I was the nurse and then leave the room for a few minutes and come back and suddenly I was her daughter now. She called every nurse with brown hair by my sister's name. The sad part is we learned she had been seriously mentally ill for a very long time. We knew she was untreated for something, but didn't realize how the hallucinations ruled her life. She was paranoid of peeping toms, so my dad would play along because that was likely the easiest way to deal with her. My poor dad. I always expected her to die first, but my dad went before my mum. Hemi-neglect is a pretty interesting one. The affected person just doesn't realize that they have two halves to their body and only take care of one. Shave one side of their face, brush their hair on that side, wash themselves on that side, and the other side basically becomes dirty mountain man. Social worker here, used to work at a psych hospital. Saw a form of OCD where the patient couldn't let go of anything she came across or made. Leaves, sticks, tampons, pads, fecal matter, some stored in Tupperware, some or most hidden where her feet went in her bed. We'd routinely have to go through her room and get everything removed. I don't remember how she did in treatment, but I remember that she was a teenager and I felt terrible that that's what she was dealing with. It seems incredibly unfair that people can just have this sort of condition their entire lives. OCD is treatable, but it seems like compulsions like this would be so hard to break, especially when they're kept hidden by the person doing them like this. Medical doctor here, not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I did encounter a pretty interesting patient case on my psychiatry rotation when I was in medical school. There was a patient at an inpatient psychiatric facility for self-deleting ideation. During her admission, she constantly insisted that she had a mass in her chest and demanded to be physically examined only by male doctors. When the psychiatrist I was rotating under declined to perform a physical exam, she asked me to do it during my daily patient interview. I also declined the physical exam, but had a bit of a hunch to check her medical records. It turned out that she had an ultrasound done a week before that found only normal tissue without masses. However, apparently this lady had frequented many doctors' offices with various complaints of an unspecific nature and would usually focus on her chest or downstairs area when she visited male physicians' offices. The psychiatrist I was working with diagnosed her with factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, and also felt that she had a personality disorder. He felt it was a histrionic personality disorder, but also felt it was possibly borderline personality disorder. Definitely cluster B though. It seems her goal was to mostly get attention from medical professionals. She had a lot of issues, but we also had to be careful to make sure she wasn't fishing for a lawsuit. Patients like her are why doctors document everything meticulously, so the patient wouldn't admit to making things up all the time. According to the psychiatrist I was working with, she didn't actually believe any of her health problems existed, and her primary goal was the attention from medical professionals. If she actually believed she was sick, we would have diagnosed her with illness anxiety disorder, commonly known as hypochondria. Medical doctor working in inpatient psychiatric facility. We had a psychotic patient with visual hallucinations who saw colored dots all around him during episodes of distress. The great thing about it was, he told us he was able to blow the colored dots away. We encouraged him to do it as it seemed to greatly reduce his anxiety. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I never saw a patient with it myself, but I'm a nurse, and in the electronic medical world, we use walking corpse syndrome. It's always at the top of the diagnosis choice list. Apparently, it's when you're convinced that you're dead. Never understood why it was top of the list. I'm an EMT and I've come across this twice. The first person was oddly pleasant. The second person had hostile tendencies towards people who tried to get them to eat or provide medical care. They'd soil themselves because corpses don't have to go to the bathroom. Mental health counselor here. The most interesting disorder I've ever treated was dissociative amnesia. The guy had big edits out of his life that had him ending up in trouble with his girlfriend, and when I was seeing him was on the border of him getting in trouble with the law. I actually know of someone that suffers from something like this from PTSD. She was in the World Trade Building on September 11th, and she barely escaped before the building she was in collapsed. After that, she acted normal, but her eyes were blank and the way she talked felt pretty forced. Anyways, for about a year after that, she disappeared. Her family thought she was kidnapped because nothing was missing from her home but her car and a few things like some clothes. The police searched but gave up. Her parents had money, so they hired some PIs that ended up finding her a year or two later. She had moved cross-country under a new name. She doesn't remember a thing from right before September 11th until they found her. I haven't talked to my buddy in a couple of years, but last I heard she was making good progress with therapists. She even got married, but never moved back. I have always thought narcissistic personality disorder was fascinating. You have people whose bullcrap is right in front of them and they'll still tell you and truly believe that they haven't done a single thing wrong. I've got a guy now who cheated on his wife and he genuinely doesn't understand why no one trusts him. It's amazing. Dated a woman who wasn't diagnosed, but I suspect she had it too. Gaslighting was real to the degree where I'd only speak with her in writing, even in person, and she'd sit there and say things she wrote weren't actually written. She eventually admitted to gaslighting, so I'm unsure if it could even be considered NPD. She'd violently argue that she did say something she didn't say, or didn't say something she did. Even in writing, we'd both be there looking at what she wrote and she'd deny it. I'd record our verbal conversations and replay things that she'd said. She'd deny saying it even as we heard it. She'd play confused in a conversation and attribute the confusion to a convo to things never said. Literally. We'd review an entire conversation, never find out what she was complaining about, and she'd just break down, cry, and yell. Worst of all, she sent me a message on Ramadan saying, "With Ramadan approaching, if I ever wrong you, please remember you probably deserved it and may Allah forgive you for being annoying." Doctor training to be a psychiatrist here. I had a patient recently who was convinced he had fathered a child. He hadn't. He got in trouble because he'd go to this kid's school to try to contact him. Parents were understandably upset and had never had any contact with the patient previously. The patient believed that Stephen Hawkins had inseminated the mother by some sort of telepathic process he couldn't explain. Truly bizarre, and so far hasn't really gained insight with treatment. He gets very emotional thinking about his son. Still works full-time though, and in many respects leads a normal life. Amazing. Yeah, it's remarkable how, apart from these certain quirks, someone with a disorder is essentially just a normal, flawed person with one blinder or eccentricity in one part of their brain. There are certainly people with mental disorders who've never been diagnosed just because it either hasn't come up in too detrimental a manner or has been repressed by societal norms. I worked as a crisis worker as a behavioral health case manager for a year. There was a client there with intermittent explosive disorder, probably the most interesting client I've ever met. Would, as the diagnosis suggests, explode during an escalation. It was too much for us to handle, and the client ended up getting taken to the hospital. I was a support worker, and one case I had was a boy with pandas syndrome. It basically manifests as severe OCD. It can completely alter the personality of a child. This kid wouldn't leave his room, to the point where he'd just pee on the carpet. He'd scream obscenities to his parents for no reason. This was actually caused by having strep throat, except the bacterial infection didn't go away and it can turn into pandas. And the treatment is most often just a very specific antibiotic. But the children often need therapy to deal with the aftermath. Their personality goes back to normal, but it's very upsetting to go through. My sister had pandas. The tricky thing with finding out in her case, though, was that before and still she has severe anxiety, oppositional defiance disorder, major depression, and ADHD. Pandas was just increasing the severity of her already existing mental health conditions, and they only wound up figuring it out because of her other rare physical health problems she was experiencing. She did end up returning back to her own unique brand of normal, but it was a pretty hellish thing watching my family struggle until then. Pain conversion disorder. I had an ex-girlfriend that was in a wheelchair, but her parents and doctor said she could walk, but her legs wouldn't let her. Her parents said she might have woken up during a surgery she had when she was a kid, because it all started after that surgery. She even went to physical therapy for it for years, and she might still do that, I don't know, but she couldn't move around without the chair. Kind of, but she couldn't walk. So it was almost a disability, but not fully. Very confusing. She was supermodel hot though, and the coolest girl I've ever dated. I've worked with one client with legit dissociative identity disorder. She reported 6 personalities, but I only ever met 4. I'm worried to find out when the other ones come out. She was actually managing fairly well, but definitely better after some trauma work and a med regime. Still pretty wild when provocative Susie would show up and not normal, straight-up Susan. DID was always interesting to me when I was in medical school because the diagnosis is pretty controversial among psychiatrists. There seemed to be a great rise in diagnoses when it was portrayed more in the media, which points to a social contagion of some sort similar to how self-deletion, eating disorders, and self-scarring are contagious behaviors when exposed to them. I'd wager a good percentage of patients diagnosed with DID actually have borderline personality disorder because of the unstoppable identity those particular patients have. According to my professors in medical school, bipolar patients are particularly vulnerable to social contagions. Selective mutism intrigued me. They have anxiety to the point where they don't speak. Happened to my mother's granddaughter. After my mum died, she drew a painting of my mum, her grandmother, saying how nice she was to her. I wish she was able to say that to her in person. However, the condition is, as I understand, related to an anxiety disorder. Jerusalem syndrome, where a person who visits the Holy Land is convinced they are Jesus. It typically goes away once the person leaves. Maybe every single one of these people with the syndrome was actually possessed by our Lord and Savior. I am joking, but it's interesting that it keeps happening. I knew a guy who claimed to be the Lord for a while. Turns out he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. I'm a licensed medical psychologist now, but before I went to graduate school, I worked in an inpatient mental health hospital on adult and adolescent units. I'd say the most interesting 2 disorders I've seen are dissociative fugue and conversion disorder. I saw both while I was there. Dissociative fugue is a condition where someone can wake up one day and believe they're a different person for a short time. My experience was a man who woke up and drove his car from his home until it ran out of gas, which happened to be in my city. He had no ID with him, and I don't remember his name, family, or any details of his life. After a short stay in the hospital and some meds, he remembered everything and had a family member pick him up and monitor him for a while. But he still had to put gas in the car, which had been towed to the hospital parking lot. Conversion disorder is characterized by the individual losing the ability to do something, like walking, seeing, or talking, and believing that has a biological component. In reality, it's a response to significant trauma and is dissociative in nature. A woman in the hospital manifested the symptom of losing her ability to walk while she was there. There was no reason as to why she wasn't able to walk. She came in walking, was unable to ambulate while there, and left walking again. My mum had paranoid schizophrenia and would eat Vicks out of the jar to coat her brain so the Protestants couldn't hear her thoughts. She was Catholic. My dad was Protestant and became Catholic to marry her. Hear me out, maybe not the most interesting disorder, but interesting in prevalence is GAD. About 40% of men and 50% of women suffer from it in my office. The Western ideals of hard work, keeping up, pulling non-existent bootstraps is mentally harming everyone. It's a serious frickin' problem that the government and Big Pharma like to profit from. It's interesting because it's so disgusting. Humans aren't designed to be pulled in 30 different directions, but that's what modern society expects, and it's killing us all. My friend has complex regional pain syndrome. She experiences non-psychogenic hallucinations as part of that pathology. She's completely aware that there are hallucinations and has no psychosis. She sees white tigers, angels, and demons. The white tigers apparently have a thick and luxurious fur that's wonderful to touch. It's a horrible condition, but that aspect of it she really likes. Psychiatrist here, one of my most interesting cases was Cotard's syndrome. I was an intern and ended up seeing the patient on the inpatient unit and later in the state hospital. Had the delusion that he was dead. You'd ask him how he was doing and he'd shout, "I'm burning in hell!" My other favorite is a patient who had the delusion of pregnancy and thinks she's pregnant with over 50 babies at the same time. I'm only a psychology student, so I haven't seen any patients yet. But one of the most interesting mental disorders I've studied is prosopagnosia. It's the inability to recognize faces. But the thing that fascinates me the most is the fact that someone with prosopagnosia will be able to recognize others by some distinct characteristics, like a mustache or the voice, and won't be able to recognize them if they shave or don't talk. What's the most obnoxious reason an employee had to GTFO? Had a guy who we hired who showed a lot of potential in sales. He was a little arrogant and had a good-sized ego, but wasn't enough of a problem. He was very good at his job, and eventually it went to his head. He started showing up late all the time, leaving early, cutting corners where he could. The final straw came when he showed up late and someone spoke up to him about it. He decided the best choice of words he could yell were, "I make the most sales and I have the biggest Johnson, so you can all F off." He was fired on the spot. The customers thought it was pretty funny though. In his defense, if he was making more sales with half the amount of time and meeting quotas, I don't know if I would have cared, but I would have fired him for saying that, so whatever. Yeah, we do let something slide when someone's sales are up, but this wasn't something we could excuse. A pawn shop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks, he set the store on fire. He actually ended up pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. I used to own a bakery, and a woman quit because she blamed her yeast infection on a bad batch of yeast I bought from China. I might be a guy, but I don't think that's how yeast infections work. I think she might have just been trying to get a rise out of you. The company I work for is a contractor for a giant corporation, and we go to different stores to do work. This new guy we hired seemed normal at first, but it turned out he was a complete frickin' moron. So, one day he goes on site with one of the senior employees to shadow him. This genius thought that because we worked for a giant corporation, we could just eat anything off the shelves and from the refrigerators for free. Well, the employee saw this and was like, "What the frick are you doing? You need to pay." And the manager comes. This guy then started fighting with the manager, then got in his car afterwards and drove off. Needless to say, his butt was fired the next day. We hired somebody to do video and photo media work. After a certain point, he felt it was selling out and didn't want to do media commercially. He wanted to do business stuff. We asked him which role he'd like. If he picked his role, we'd try it out. If he didn't, he'd quit. He'd decided to quit. He couldn't come up with a role. Medical clinic. An employee told a patient he wants to know what she tastes like. Doesn't get much worse. Not many exit interviews start with, "We really hope that was just you hitting on her, but we're going to inventory the samples just in case." Ugh, I hadn't even thought that the gentleman in question actually does legitimately have the means to consume parts of his patients if that was actually his goal. Gross. I used to manage a store in the mall. One of my employees, I'm pretty sure, was cheating on her husband with a mall security guard. I'd come by on my days off and he'd scurry out in a fluster. I never mentioned it, but the guy was coming by all the time to the point it was keeping her from doing her job. Finally, we had a work meeting and I said in a very non-accusatory way to everyone something like this. "I know it gets slow in here during the week and I'm guilty of it myself, but from now on I need everyone to keep personal visits to a minimum during your lunch break." This one lady stands up and starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her? I'm a B-word. She quits. She continued to call me and leave me long, aggressive rants on voicemail for a while as well. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3 or 4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his personal time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day, he came back from lunch smelling like beer and I let him go on the spot. A few years later, he showed up at my office asking for his old job back. He said he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he's doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. This lady was using the company FedEx to deliver purses for her Etsy job. We had an employee who'd been fired and it was one of those really contentious firings and he was physically removed from the building. After he was fired, he used the company FedEx to deliver his eBay sales. The company brought charges against him. It wasn't 1 or 2 sales here and there. He had a whole huge operation and was shipping out more than 20 shipments a week. I guess he thought it was too big a corporation for anyone to be reviewing the FedEx bills. Which was true until one of the big executives hired on a family member and we had to find something for them to do. I worked for a boutique hotel. You know, small, cute, expensive as frick. I was an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had to come in, I was the law. I got a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overnight guy tried to attack him. I gave a sigh, as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and holy crap, our night guy legitimately lunged at his coworker and tried to strangle him. Luckily, a desk was between them, and that gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly, I felt like a jerk for doubting him. Well, this is when I call the area manager. We show up at the butt crack of dawn and speak with the guy who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video, and I crap you not, he responds with, "I don't recall the events of that evening." We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from him from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide a positive reference, as legally that was all I could say. Years ago, like in the 90s, my husband worked for a small company. He did a little bit of everything, and one of his jobs, along with a coworker, was keeping all the computers running. Now, this was a sales-based company, so all of the salespeople had laptops for themselves. If there was an issue or problem, they'd bring them in to be looked at. So one day, one of the non-local sales guys was in for a meeting. He said, "Hey, my computer is running really slowly. Can you take a look at it?" My husband says, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Sales guy leaves the computer and goes to whatever meeting he was off to. My husband and his colleague take a look and see that the hard drive is nearly full and figured that was slowing things down. They dig deeper and see the computer is filled with adult movies, like filled with it. Material of all sorts. Nothing illegal per se, but very close to it. Now, mind you, the salespeople have signed an agreement that their assigned computer was for business use only, not personal use. So we have a slight problem here. My husband and his colleague, not wanting to make a mountain out of a molehill, and not wanting the guy to lose his job over a fixable problem, just wiped the drive clean, reformatted it, got things set up again, and the computer was working great. The guy comes back the next day and my husband goes, "Hey, Mr. Sales Guy, we took a look at your computer. It was running slowly because the disk was nearly full with personal files, so we wiped it clean, reformatted things, and you're good to go. You know, just a reminder that our company-issued computers are for business use only. If you're looking for something for personal use, here are some relatively inexpensive laptops with a lot of storage space. You can put whatever you want on them. Small investment for privacy, you know?" And with that, they gave him a printout list of some good, reasonably priced laptops he could purchase for himself. The sales guy just kind of mumbled something, grabbed his computer, and was on his way without so much as a thank you. Well, the guys figured that was that, but guess who was back 6 weeks later with a not working at all computer? Yep, same idiot. Problem? Yep, computer was filled again with adult movies. They were done at this point. The two of them went straight to the president's office, showed her what was on the computer, well enough to give her an idea, and explained what had happened previously. She was a very no-nonsense lady, so needless to say, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, that sales guy was no longer employed. What an idiot. Oh boy, they really gave this guy every warning they could give him without directly telling him, "Don't have videos of people doing the nasty on your work computer," and he still didn't get it, or didn't care enough to stop. Stupid either way, my dude. About a year ago, I hired a guy who was down on his luck. Went against my best judgment. Due to the nature of my business, I usually don't hire people that fit his profile. He was out of shape, poor hygiene and stuff, and it wasn't long before I started hearing complaints from female employees and clients. Turns out he'd often attempt to flirt with women, and when turned down, he'd lose his mind and call them terrible names and insults. I don't tolerate that crap, so I gave him a very stern warning. The very next day, I found one of my sweetest female employees visibly upset. Upon inquiring, she said that this idiot had followed her home yesterday to make sure she got home safely. Then he showed up in the morning to escort her to the office. She was genuinely scared. I called him into my office and told him to scram. He threatened to file a complaint with the Department of Labor for discrimination against men who have an innate need to protect women. It didn't matter. I told him to beat it, and now I'm fighting the stupidest claim ever with the Department of Labor. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatrol at 10:30 p.m. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a menage a four in one of my offices that I'd converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-deed and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways, and then mentioned to make sure she was only ever at the office between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio activities in the building. When I got back to town, her keys were sitting on my desk. I fired a guy because he said he couldn't come to work because it was raining and he'd just washed his car the day before. Had a guy on location fake an injury. Now, mind you, he did injure himself severely, accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan had been to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up hurting himself way worse. You ask, how did he know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite, practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not my business, but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records, and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day, one of the supervisors from the lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. The supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. The guy was instantly fired. It didn't stop him from trying to give other people with troubled backgrounds a second chance, though. One of my dad's best friends of 30-plus years and his brother were both ex-cons and struggled to get jobs. Plus, with the exception of this guy, they were all super reliable and gave him no problems. Everyone with no record, me probably being the only exception, gave my dad a ton of problems and weren't as reliable. He and his ex-cons worked well until the business went under many years later. At a previous job, we had issues with food being stolen from the break room fridge. The company made a big stink about it, and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the break room. Like big frickin' cameras in plain sight pointing at the fridge, with our bosses being very direct about it. There is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating someone's sandwich? A few days later, my guy gets fired for stealing food again, literally on camera just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it then and there. I work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told this story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the refrigerator. This warehouse, big company, this wasn't at my location, they kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. Nobody knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some they could ask, but couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally, a camera was installed near the fridge and he got caught red-handed. He was practically inhaling the hot dogs directly from the fridge by the packet. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the AIDA, and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector and editor. He had this one employee who'd been there since day one and ended up being similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for more than 10 years, and just recently, he had to fire that assistant manager guy because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, and that he's just a terrible person. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out this employee was basically just a narcissistic sociopath. My dad was just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. A guy threw a hammer at another guy for changing the radio station. Look, we've all wanted to do this kind of thing before, right? When someone changes the radio, or leaves the door open, or keeps sniffing too loudly, right? You just can't act on those intrusive voices, folks. Wait, we all have those urges though, right? My employee had a corporate card, charged a vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, and she was racking up all this evidence along with actually just being miserable to work with. She had a laptop, quote, stolen within weeks of joining our company. I fired her, and a few days later, a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. We have an active court case for all the theft. The one that instantly leaps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she just wouldn't stop having a good time with herself, if you know what I mean. It was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s or early 40s, and I don't think this was an employment scam or anything like that, and more likely just a mental compulsion or substance use. It was not subtle, but done under a shawl or scarf thing draped over her lap. She was politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, and then stopped momentarily but started up again 15 to 20 minutes later. I am not sure how she got through HR screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Back when I had my translation business, I hired a guy to seek out contracts for me, and I'd pay him 20% finder's fee. Instead of sending the finished project to a client, he accidentally sent undressed pictures of himself, and I learned of it when my client forwarded me the mail half an hour later, including the multiple glorious shots of his trouser snake. I don't even. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and that they'd undercut me by 10%. I learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. I knew somebody who had to take a substance test, so he bought a little sample jar of clean urine with him, went into the toilet, came out, gave the fake sample to whoever was doing the test, and got fired on the spot. The sample was ice cold. Fresh number 1 is hot. My wife's cousin worked with me and her father at our work, landscaping, for a couple of months. He had previous experience and we needed the help, so we hired him, despite warnings to the owner from my father-in-law that he was a complete jerk. To name a few things, we were putting fresh mulch in one of the industrial parks that we maintained, and he had me close the doors to the bed of the truck, after which he raised the bed so that all the mulch would slide to the back. Except the doors weren't designed for that kind of load and immediately sprang open. If they hadn't hit the ground while springing open, they would have royally screwed up the cars on either side of us. He then proceeded to call the owner of the company and tell him what happened, placing all the blame on me for, quote, not closing the doors right. We took him on a paver job and he insisted that he could cut pavers with our wet saw. Except he didn't use gloves, so the material from the pavers being cut, which includes some nasty stuff, absolutely destroyed the skin on his hands, and he called out for the next 2 days because he couldn't move his fingers. That was not the first time he had made that mistake. On the same paver job, which called for a Belgian block to be installed along the driveway, he decided it would be a great idea to mix the mortar and the sand for the base on the owner's freshly paved driveway and use it as he needed it. Except it rained the day he did this, and he ended up with a 3/4-ton block of what was essentially concrete in the middle of their, again, freshly paved driveway. On multiple occasions, we got reports from the grass-cutting crew that he went out with that he did nothing all day except sit in the truck, text his wife, and smoke. He thought he could get away with this because neither myself nor my father-in-law were with him. Eventually, he was fired, and we got a couple of extremely nasty but entertaining phone calls from his wife, calling all of us some choice names while vowing that we were no longer part of his family. My dad and I ran a business together cleaning out foreclosed homes for a real estate agency as I was finishing high school. I was a senior, so I got out at lunchtime, and we could usually get a house done in half a day. Sometimes we'd get some real bad ones, and we had a few guys would call in to see if they wanted to make a quick $100 for a day's work. On my literal last day of class, my dad picked up one of our usual guys and got the house done about 90% by lunch. He was a pretty normal guy that we never had any trouble with. The guy we paid to help my dad went out to his truck and came back into that house with a 9mm and robbed my dad at weapon point of his wallet and took his keys and left in our truck. The funny thing is, my dad only had the cash he was about to give him an hour later for finishing up the house. The state police got the guy's number from us, and they told him some bogus story about how my dad was being investigated for not paying his workers, and if he met the police with the truck, they'd get his statement and let him go. The idiot pulls up and gets arrested on the spot. He got 8 years in prison. That has to be a contender for dumbest criminal, right? If you steal a car and get a call from the popo saying, "Hello, can you bring that exact truck you happen to have to us for an unrelated matter?" you should be abandoning it or fleeing the state. We had a young IT intern helping us with some hardware inventory tasks. It wasn't uncommon for laptops not to make it back to us, as projects would hoard them from terminated employees. But one day, we noticed his backpack open and a laptop of a model we used sticking out. Sent him to the other side of the building and checked the serial number, and yep, it was one he reported as missing during a recent inventory. Opportunistic theft is one thing, but bringing it back into the office every day? Just, wow. There was this one guy at my work, extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, but this guy was absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you'd let him. One day, I was on register and I saw him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he'd been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above-listed games. At least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. Not me, but my dad. His worker asked if he wanted to assist in making crystal. He no longer works for my dad. Also, him and his girlfriend got busted for making said crystal and are serving 5 years. My actual name is Skylar, but that doesn't mean that this is a Breaking Bad reference. Committing no notable offense, but faking incompetence or causing inconvenience in order to be fired and receive severance pay. Yes, I'm familiar with Better Call Saul and I love it, but as it turns out, and hold on to your seats for this, that being a jerk for money is not exclusive to that show. A new heavy mechanic was hired, claimed to have prior experience. He was hired because he had a kid on the way and was in a bad spot financially, and the owners had a soft spot for unlucky people. Within a week, his nickname was Almost. He almost did the work correctly. He almost rewired an electrical system. He almost rebuilt an air dryer successfully. He almost mounted tires. The probability of the part he rebuilt failing within a week was a solid 60%. By the end of week 2, it was clear most of his knowledge was book-learned and not real-world. They wouldn't let him do anything except change oil. Once his probation period was up and he showed no improvement or drive, they let him go. Trucks only make money when they move, and he could not keep them moving. Burglars. What are the best ways to keep you out of our houses? If you're in a very studenty area of UK cities, when you order a taxi, get it from a slightly different address, like a block of flats with lots of lights on, or a house you know has no one living in it. And be waiting outside, or better yet, get it from outside a supermarket or pub. In my city, certain cab drivers are in cahoots with burglars and let them know when a house is empty for most of the night, because the students are out clubbing, even if they leave a light on or something. I live in Liverpool, for everyone asking, which has a lot of break-ins on every road in the student area. And get your frickin' stuff insured. Landlord insurance generally covers the building, but not your possessions. Get an alarm system and use the stickers and signs saying that you have one. I'm more likely to skip a house with an alarm system. Don't make it easy for me. Lock your doors, close your windows, and most importantly, lock them. 95% of the houses I've been in, I just walked through the door or climbed through an open window. Don't leave tools laying around that's going to make my job easier. Ladders, saws, drills, sledgehammers, putty knives. All of these make it easier for me to get into your house. Contrary to popular belief, most dogs aren't a problem. Unless they've been trained to be dog guards, it doesn't take much to make one friendly. And don't advertise. If you just bought an expensive piece of electronic equipment or jewelry or tools, don't brag about it in public, don't leave the trash in sight, and don't post about it on Facebook. Use security hedges under your windows. If your house has rose bushes and your neighbors don't, I'm more likely to try their house first. If it's irreplaceable, don't leave it out in the open. Get a safe for stuff like that, and make sure you bolt it down. I'll happily take a safe with me and open it later. Don't live in a nice neighborhood. When I'm looking to steal, I don't go to the poor neighborhoods. I go to the subdivisions and wealthier areas. Don't assume I'm going to wait until it's dark to rob a place. Between 9 a.m. and noon are the best times to hit. Most everyone's gone to work, and those who aren't are running errands or sleeping. That being said, invest in motion sensor lights. If someone's outside your house at night, this can help. Finally, be suspicious and alert. Is there someone new walking your neighborhood that doesn't live there? Is someone getting yard care or pest control deliveries outside of what's normal for them? Does the same car keep cruising around at different times? You see, I'll study a neighborhood before I strike. Sometimes I'll spend upwards of a month. I'll note times people leave and arrive. I'll note when or if cops patrol certain areas and when. I'll pay attention to the delivery times, mailman times, and various other service people to see when they arrive, what they do, and how they're dressed. I'll watch to see who leaves windows open, who forgets to lock their doors, and so on. It doesn't take much time to make a hit and get away either. On average, I spend 8 minutes in a house, rarely more than that. Thank you to the actual burglars or people who claim to be burglars writing in. If you'd like to supplement your stories with credentials, feel free to leave your names, numbers, and photographs of any stolen items with our agents at your local police station for verification. Well, I don't steal anymore, but I used to a lot. Alarm signs are the biggest deterrent. I'm going in through your front door. I'm not going to check windows or creep into your backyard or any sketchy stuff like that. The neighbors calling the cops is really the only danger. I dress nicely in a collared shirt and slacks. I'm white and clean-cut and fairly good-looking, a bit like a police officer. Your dog is useless. There's too much on the line to worry about, Fido. I've never been attacked by a dog, but if I was… No, I wouldn't want to hurt your dog, but yes, I would have if it attacked me. If you have an 8-foot-tall, fire-breathing dog, then yes, it probably is a good deterrent. Make sure your dog's fire-breathing is on point because none of us wants your dog to get hurt. I look for houses with the least viewpoints from the neighbors. Having an open front porch is your best defense. You should park in your garage. Parking in front of the garage is a telltale sign that there's likely no other car moving in and out of the garage, and the driver is likely at work. I can tell because of the discoloration. Pick up your newspapers. Stop your mail and newspaper if you're leaving town. If I pop the door and an alarm goes off, I'll probably leave. Make friends with your neighbors so they know who should be at your house. Going in and someone being home is terrifying. I don't want to hurt anybody and I certainly don't want to get shot. Also, the risk for getting caught just went from 3 years to 25. I will run screaming from the frailest old lady. Again, this isn't me anymore, but perhaps it gives you some insight. Stay safe. I see some guys in here saying to have a robust door. I've never been stopped by a door. It's very easy to kick one in and I would carry a flat bar. A solid core door with heavily reinforced framing might work? Spend big if you want this to be a viable defense, because it likely isn't. You could place a sticker in the window that reads, "Premises protected by Radio Shack." That sign really says that you have nothing worth stealing. If anybody tried to steal my 8-track player, I would try and knock them out with my VCR, and if that didn't work, I'd throw my Walkman at them. These answers come from a post titled "Burglars of Reddit." We really are a diverse community, aren't we? Don't post on Facebook that you're not home and how long you'll be out. To elaborate on this, don't post vacation photos to your social media until you're back home. But my coworkers need to see them immediately for the full effect of jealous rage. This one's always confused me. My Facebook posts are set to friends only. I trust my friends. I keep having relatives send me Facebook messages berating me for saying that I'm going to the movies because someone's going to rob me. No, they're not. I spent a year and a half in prison after being convicted of multiple residential burglaries. I was caught after a mailman called 911 after seeing me go through a window. I had a pretty good run of burglaries from 2007 to 8, and I haven't done any in 7 years, so technology and times have changed since my spree, but here's how I picked my houses. First, I'd generally only go in the daytime during the week. The idea was for the adults to be at work and the kids be at school. 2, I'd try and find a corner house because it would have at least one side with no neighbors. 3, I went in middle-class neighborhoods close to a community college. I live in a large US city and needed an excuse to be in my late 20s walking around with a backpack. I'd stand out too much in wealthy neighborhoods, and poorer neighborhoods often have bars on windows because they expect to be robbed. Middle-class people seem to be careless. I often went in through an unlocked back door. Interestingly enough, I never went in through a front door. I'd always go to the backside because any fences would provide coverage. 4, people think a large dog would be a good deterrent, but I generally avoided those annoying small yapping dogs that never shut up. 5, I often went through a bedroom window, whether it was unlocked or not. I'm committing a major felony. I don't care about a broken window. 6, I usually went to a master bedroom because that's where the good stuff was. Things a homeowner can do besides armed guards around the clock? You can get a dog that doesn't like strangers. I don't care if it's big or small or threatening or friendly. As soon as one dog barks, the whole neighborhood starts barking and announcing a burglar's presence. Cameras. Inside and out. I knew a guy who was caught because he walked by someone's webcam inside their house and ended up on the news. Make the cameras visible. If I see a camera, I'm not just moving on to the next house, I'm going several streets away. A lock-back fence and restricted access to the backyard. That's generally where I broke into the houses from, so it makes sense. I should tell you, your beware of dog and security alarm signs and stickers are completely worthless. I once broke into a house through a doggy door. There was no dog home. 5, try not to have any stools or anything in the backyard. They make climbing through windows easier. You should keep your windows open. Burglars are extremely superstitious and believe that an open window is a sign of a bad omen? I'm sorry, but I have a Mac. It's funny, I was going to post a life pro tip about this subject. The life pro tip: if you're a burglar, talk to children. They'll tell you everything. Example, the other day we were at the store with my 5-year-old. A random woman smiled at her and says, "Hi, aren't you pretty? What's your name?" My daughter then proceeds to rattle off her full name, first, middle, and last, her mummy and daddy's names, what city she lives in, the fact that her older sister just got a new TV and a Nintendo Wii U, and that she's so excited because we're all going to be taking a trip to visit our family in California next month. All in the space of about 30 seconds. She just had so much stuff she was excited to share with her new friend that she couldn't stop talking. Maybe she secretly hates all of you and knew exactly what she was doing. This used to be a TV show, I believe it was called It Takes a Thief, but they had 2 ex-cons rob someone's house and then give that person tips on how they could be better protected. One time they had a cop volunteer to be robbed and he was shocked by how easily the robbers stole his stuff. What about moats? Why is nobody mentioning moats? To all of the many medieval dukes out there writing in with this exact complaint, there haven't been many replies, but speaking from experience, I can tell you that you're better off investing in guards than ditches filled with water. Moats might deter any enemy armies, but a thief will simply walk into a castle under the pretense of doing business alongside other tradesmen and common labourers. Lock your deadbolts. I can't tell you how easy it is to card a boot with the deadbolt unlocked. Might as well leave the door wide open. Confederate flag. It says not only do you own many weapons, but you really want an excuse to use them. If you hear me rattling around your house, you should hide in a closet and jump out to scare me. Rather than shoot you, I would run like a baby, i.e. making brown, waddling away for a few steps before I fall and bash my head on the coffee table. Undressed grandma. That'll scare off anyone. I was once visiting a female friend of mine who lived in a bit of a crappy neighborhood. At the time, I was working construction and swung by after work. I got to the house and took my size 12 work boots off and left them on the front porch. I tend to carry a pair of flip-flops in my bag and changed into those, then we hit a patio for some sunshine beers. I ended up getting my boots at her place and was in no rush to get them back as I had another pair. Now, I don't know how true this is, but she swears that having a pair of big work boots right by her front door made her safer. I'd pretty much forgotten about them as they were on their way out, but she left them right where they were. She had less craziness happen in her front yard, fewer strangers knocking on her door, and she wasn't broken into again at that place. Of course, it could have just been the smell. Cover everything in mayonnaise. I mean everything. The bed, the surfaces, the dog, yourself, everything. Burglars hate mayonnaise. To the legitimate burglars writing in here, I feel I need to tell you something. My brother and one of my friends, completely independently of each other, almost have a fantasy about shooting a burglar. They both have this romantic visualization of them being the good guy hero and burglars being the perfect example of a bad guy that's coming into their house to attack their family. They daydream and plan for this scenario. My brother even has his alarm siren turned off when he's home, so it only rings on his phone and won't scare an intruder away, like he's hunting or something. I just want you to know that these people are out there. If they break into your house, you're getting shot by a guy with a raging hero hard-on. And I frequently hear the same thing. You need to shoot to kill, because if you don't, they'll sue you. It's not worth it. Stay out of other people's houses. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This article from the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing is not written by a burglar, but it answers the question quite thoroughly. Burglars select targets based on a number of key factors, including the following: familiarity with the target and convenience of the location. Like houses near a ready pool of offenders, houses near major thoroughfares, houses on the outskirts of the neighborhoods, houses previously burglarized, or houses near burglarized houses. Then occupancy, houses vacant for extended periods, houses routinely vacant during the day, houses of new residents, houses without dogs. Then there's visibility or surveillability, houses with cover, houses that are secluded, houses with poor lighting, houses on corners, houses with concealing architectural designs. Accessibility, houses easily entered through the side or back doors or windows, houses next to alleys. Vulnerability or security, houses with weakened entry points, houses whose residents are careless about security, houses with few or no security devices, and finally, potential rewards, houses displaying signs of wealth. This is a huge fear of mine, but what do burglars do with pets? I don't even care about my electronics, but don't you dare touch Mr. Mittens. 3 words. Rooftop Korean snipers. I've got a shoddy tripwire trap on every entrance. I've seen a couple of these supposed experts saying your dog is useless. That's bullcrap. If you have a little yappy dog, that makes sense. But my home was broken into several years ago during the middle of the day. I had a lab GSD mix, like a lot of people would say nicest dog ever, would probably kiss you to death, blah blah blah. And I got a call from the cops because someone driving by called the police after seeing a bloody man in a ripped shirt running away from our front door. When I got home, my front door area just inside my house had what looked like a little dried blood on the floor and door. The police said when they arrived the dog was just laying there staring at the door. The police said he barked as they arrived but quickly and easily calmed down. Nothing was taken and only a small table by the door where we put our keys and stuff was knocked over. Long story short, the guy brought himself to the hospital and the cops picked him up as he was leaving. We didn't press charges for breaking in or anything, just let the police handle it, and never actually saw the guy, but the police officer told us his cheek was totally torn from the side of his mouth towards his jawline. We figured Pickles did enough justice and our lives would be easier to just move on. Yeah, there's been some back and forth on whether or not a dog is an issue, but this is our first account of an otherwise sweet pooch absolutely wrecking a wannabe thief's day. I guess it depends on the thief's animal handling skills and on the random quirks of personality that the doggo in question has. I grew up with a whole lot of thieving scumbags. Bank robbers, carjackers, you name it. So here are my suggestions in no particular order. Get a big frickin' dog. Very few thieves want to deal with that. If they aren't specifically targeting your house, then they'll move on to the next one. For houses they are targeting, they'll leave poisoned food outside and keep an eye out for that. Don't use window air conditioners. This was by far the most common way to gain access by my friends. Kick in the AC and climb on in. If nothing of value is found, the AC could be taken in for scrap metal. Motion detecting lights. They're a minor annoyance, and they'll scare off the brainless junkies. Visible cameras. They can be fake, though they're so cheap you may as well just spring for real ones. Don't leave your garage door open. Thieves like to drive around nice neighborhoods looking for people who've left their garages open. They love a situation where someone might be mowing their backyard. Quickly hop out the car, run into the garage, grab as many tools as they can, and run. If they bought a truck, they'll be grabbing bigger stuff. You probably won't even notice or know what happened. Make it a royal pain in the butt to get into your backyard. A 10-foot fence would be nice. No one likes breaking in through the front door or front windows. Nobody likes scaling 10-foot fences either. This complements the get a big fricking dog concept. Don't keep your car keys on a hook next to the front door. Newer cars are impossible for an average thief to hotwire. Easy as heck to kick in your front door and snatch the keys straight off the hook though. And related to the above, don't answer the door for strangers. If thieves are casing out the neighborhood, they'll pretend to be magazine salesmen or Jehovah's Witnesses just to take a peek of what's inside, especially that hook for car keys. Once again, a big frickin' dog can help here. Get an alarm system. If you can't pony up for that, get the stickers and signage off eBay. Don't keep anything in your car, especially work trucks or vans. Heck, I even know of someone who robbed a cop car. Keep your vehicles empty. Locks don't matter. The lock on the back door of a work van can be popped out in 5 seconds with a slide, puller, and a screw. The locks on your house are frickin' useless as well. If you're really paranoid and have a good budget, steel door frame and a solid steel door. I don't have much of any other advice on that. Just don't trust locks. Lock those doors. Even though I don't think much of locks, don't leave your house unlocked either. Deadbolts on every exterior door. Keep your expensive stuff out of sight. Your 70-inch flat screen should not be visible from the street. Your MacBook Pro shouldn't be kept right in front of your first-floor office window. Don't invite strangers over. Hosting an open invitation kegger is a terrible idea. If a thief shows up, they're either stealing something right then and there or they're casing the joint to come back later. If you have a safe, use it. It's utterly stupid how many people who have them just leave them open all the time because it's annoying. If you have firearms, try to keep that information to yourself. There's a whole subset of thieves dedicated to scouting out weapon owners and robbing them when they're not home. Don't post your entire social life publicly on social media. The people scouting out robberies aren't always across the street in a sketchy van. They're just following you on Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, and Instagram. Keep anything that's really expensive in a bank security box. If your grandmother passed on a $50K diamond ring to you, don't keep it in your jewelry box. Don't do illegal stuff. The houses of substance dealers are robbed on a constant basis because the thieves know the cops won't get called. and the propensity for those victims to have expensive jewelry and electronics as collateral. Stay on the up and a lot of trouble will avoid you. Leave the TV and lights on when you're not home. Not only does it give the impression of someone being home, it will also entertain and comfort your big frickin' dog. If you're in an apartment, do whatever you can to add more locks, if possible according to your lease. Alarm system, cameras, all that stuff. There are lots of shady maintenance men and landlords out there. Lock your patio door even if you live on the 10th floor. Scaling the sides of buildings is actually pretty frickin' easy. If you're prohibited from owning a big frickin' dog, a little annoying yip-yapping ankle-biting dog can do something. Cats are fricking useless. Keep the flaunting to a minimum. If you have an expensive vehicle, at least try to keep it in a garage. If you have lots of expensive tools, don't fly a snap-on banner outside your garage. Don't put up a "This house is protected by Smith & Wesson" sign. Read up and be aware of how most popular scams work. Water meter scams, fence salesman scams, etc. Most of the time, someone will be distracting you somehow while their accomplice sneaks into your home. Just don't talk to strangers and you'll avoid all of them. Junkies love to rob the elderly. Medications and jewelry. Your broke college butt is probably safe, but please make sure your grandmother is all set. Don't leave an extra key under your doormat or under a rock or in your mailbox or on top of the doorframe. None of those. Also worth discussing are what to do when a burglar is in your house. You should get the F out. Your PlayStation is not worth getting shanked over. You will most likely lose any fights you start, so don't do that. Call the cops. Don't count on them to save you, but do it anyways. At the very least, you'll most likely have to file a police report anyways for an insurance claim. The chambering of a shotty generally scares the crap out of thieves. Real thieves will get the frick out of there if they think someone has a weapon. Junkies, though, might be too messed up to notice. Or they might have their own and not care. Still best to get the F out. If there is no way to avoid an encounter with the robber, get undressed. Not down to your undies, I mean 100% starkers. Get crazy. Yell things. This is not advised for attractive women, but for the average male on the internet, that's a viable deterrent for anyone. Your thief almost certainly has a specific game plan in mind. They know how they're going in, where they plan to go, what they plan to take, where they plan to exit, and how they plan to leave. Anything that can be done that will majorly disrupt their plan will generally make them leave ASAP. Mace. You can't legally procure mace. Sporting goods stores can carry bear spray. If you can't get that either for some reason, wasp or hornet spray. Again, I really can't stress this enough. Goal number 1 is to get the F out. Don't bring wasp spray to a firefight. If you have your keys on you, set off your car alarm. And lastly, just some general advice. Follow your local news and police reports vigorously. You should be able to get a feel for the kinds of crime happening in your area, and you can figure out a game plan based on that. Personally, my area is high crime, but it's all smash and grab type thefts. While my vehicle has been robbed 3 times in the past year, I have zero concern whatsoever that I'll be the victim of an armed home invasion. It's just not the style of the area. If you have a choice, try to live in a moderately populated area near a police station. Living at the end of an isolated cul-de-sac is going to be a lot easier for a thief to get into without being noticed than a townhouse in a 100-unit property. Be friendly with your neighbors to the point where they'll recognize any sketchy activity. Keep your nose clean and don't associate yourself with sketchy characters. Crime begets crime. It's callous for me to say, but really 90% of the victims of crime that I know had it coming. Keep receipts for anything you paid more than $250 for, and keep them in a fireproof safe. If you do end up having to file an insurance claim, they're going to screw you over hardcore without any documentation. Be aware that for high-ticket items, they're required to be scheduled on your policy ahead of time. If you have a $15,000 home theater system or $20,000 in collectible Magic the Gathering cards, your insurance company needs to know about that ahead of time. Keep serial numbers and photos if possible of anything you care about. If your laptop gets stolen and you see it the next day in the pawn shop down the street, it won't mean anything unless you have that serial number already on file somewhere. Register all of your products with the manufacturer whenever possible. You will have one hell of a time dealing with an automotive theft claim if the thief used your car keys. Keep those safe. Make copies of all your important documents, including copies of all your credit cards. It'll be 100 times easier to cancel all of them if a thief gets them. Shred any important documents you're throwing out. I could write endlessly about identity theft. I'll save that for another day. Big fricking dog. Regularly back up your computer to some cloud-based service. Dropbox, Google Drive and stuff. If someone steals your laptop, it shouldn't mess up your life. Install some sort of tracking app on your computer and phone right now if you haven't already. What can a guy do that sets off your man-child alert? They will always find some way to push the blame onto others. It's never their fault. And yes, I have to agree that in general this applies to both men and women. And maybe my cat. Incredibly irresponsible, puts off things indefinitely until someone else does it for them. Probably the kind to complain that their mother or girlfriend or wife is a nag, because they have to resort to that to get them to do crap. This comment was a huge realization for me. No wonder I haven't found an acceptable way to ask him to do anything. There is no acceptable way. There really isn't. You can't force someone to be responsible. I really wish I hadn't wasted over a decade of my life with that guy. People aren't going to change if they don't want to, and he was happy being a man-child. Monster Energy logos on his back window. I've seen a couple of people recently, usually at festivals with Monster tattoos. I'm unsure if Monster are actually paying them to tattoo their logo on their arms or if they're just really that obsessed with the energy drink. When he doesn't know how to do a load of washing and refuses to try and learn. This in general. If someone refuses to try and learn a common task because they don't want to, that person has some latent narcissism that you're going to run into down the line. When they're all over a girl and then she rejects them and suddenly she's a grotesque demon, apparently. Throws a tantrum when they don't get their way, like a child screaming in a store because their mum wouldn't buy them a toy. So they never grew out of that. They only act nice because they want something in return. Everything has strings and an underwritten contract. I've known and read of a few breakups that happened because it turns out after they moved out of their parents' place, they treated their partner like they were their new mother or father. The guys who not only can't cook or clean or do basic adult domestic tasks, but they're weirdly proud of the fact to the point of bragging about it. No, I'm not impressed that you're an adult and can't manage to take care of yourself, bro. Get your crap together. After seeing some of these, it feels good that none of it describes me. Although, I do still feel like a teenager who just wants to play video games and eat junk food. The key is that even though we want to play video games, we sweep the floors, do the dishes, walk the dogs, and then play video games. Ditto from me. The narrator did kind of come to this question to see how much of a man-child he was. Turns out there's a bunch of us repressed man-children who managed to adult at least in our working and relationship lives. Mostly. Ugh, when his mom still runs his life. You should have added, and he's still okay with his mum running his life. I had to fight nails and teeth to get my independence from my mother and couldn't make it happen. I had to leave it all behind. I was always her little boy, forcing her unwanted attention on me when she needed emotional relief or an ego boost whilst denying my needs. Mothers, treat your kids as human beings. They're not your emotional support animals. Filthy apartment. Floors never swept or washed. Toilet smells like hell's urinal. Piles of dirty laundry. Few or no kitchen utensils. Garbage hasn't been taken out in who knows how long. Kitchen littered with Gatorade bottles and fast food or frozen meal containers. Nasty bed sheets and posters of scantily clad models or Scarface movie posters as the only decorations. My roommates dragged me down to that level over time. Putting up with other people's addictions and misuse of time is tiring. Doesn't offer to help clean up after you cook for him. Goes straight to the couch. Help? Frick that. One party cooks, the other washes up. That's like 99% of the reason I got good at cooking. When my now fiancé moved out for the first time and he expected me to come over to cook and clean for him, he learned pretty quick and is now a better cook than me. Go figure. Still holding on to a lie even after he's been caught. I'm holding the truth to his face, but he still denies it. Damn, he could have become a politician. These answers are making me feel real good about myself. Can't keep a relationship going because they're more in love with a fantasy version of the girl they were with, so whenever a problem actually comes along, instead of working through it, they get upset and bail because she wasn't who he thought she was, and doesn't actually put work into anything. I had an ex in his mid-20s who had his mum cut his toenails for him. Cut his toenails. I noped the F out, but I'm ashamed of how long it took me. Oh, here we go. I had a roommate named Fergus. He moved in with me and one other girl in August. About November, we noticed that Fergus, while using every dish in the house, had never actually washed anything. The other girl and I had been taking turns, but not talking about it since our schedules were so opposite, so we'd never realized that Fergus was such a piece of crap. But then, she went out of state for a couple of months, and I quickly told Fergus playtime was over. It was his turn to do the dishes. He had the good grace to apologize for not getting around to it, and mentioned that if he'd ever seen the sink really full, he'd of course have done some dishes, but we'd just washed his stuff before he had a chance. Okay, whatever man. I did the dishes from a small Thanksgiving dinner and then left the kitchen to Fergus. I used paper plates and cups and plastic silverware for the next month. I didn't really cook, just microwaved it. It was finals anyways. And Fergus proceeded to use dishes without washing them until every cupboard was empty and every glass, plate, bowl, cup, and fork was crusted and filthy in a pile. He clearly expected me to cave if he made a big enough mess. The other girl would have within a week. I am made of sterner stuff, however. I fully intended to wait however long it took. Christmas Eve morning, after 30 days of this bullcrap, I awake to the astonishing sound of the kitchen being cleaned. There's water running, plates clinking, dishwasher going. I walked out in amazement and found a complete stranger cleaning my kitchen. She looked up at me in somewhat unfriendly manner, and Fergus pipes up from the living room, where he's sitting motionless on his phone. "Hey, this is Mum. She came to pick me up for Christmas." I laughed. Obnoxiously. I laughed at the man-child who got his mum to drive 4 hours to do his dishes and drive him home when he was 25 years old. She defended him. "I don't see anything funny about this." Oh, this is hilarious," I said and went back to my room. She mopped the floor and then they left. After that, I basically told him he was going to pay a service or pay me to clean the kitchen once a week because he obviously couldn't be trusted with the level of responsibility you'd give a 13-year-old. His mum sent him an extra $75 a month for the rest of the lease. I had a roommate who always thought he was pulling his own weight. It was a self-perception issue. To counter this, I always cleaned my own dishes immediately and put them back in the cabinets and never filled the sink. When the sink got full, he'd get mad at me. It was pretty funny. Good guy, just lazy. One thing that bothered me though is that when he'd put bags of trash by the door instead of taking them out. Like, dude, just walk an extra 10 feet instead of leaving smelly garbage by the door. Somebody that absolutely won't prioritize and budget their money wisely. My ex-roommate was quick to spend his money on gambling, beer, and cigarettes, but always cried poor when it came time to pay rent, along with his share of the household bills, and bugged his mum like crazy to give him money every single time. His mum was apparently well off. Okay, so there's no mention of still playing with Lego, so I think I'm safe. I don't play. I build. If a spaceship happens to follow a logical flight plan and makes a whoosh sound on its way to the display shelf, that's not my fault. Living like a smackhead, eating like a 12-year-old, doesn't read, doesn't progress, complains endlessly, never assumes responsibility, but would say things like, "I'm such a jerk, I'm so stupid, I'm a mess." Like, yeah, okay, and what are you going to do about it, Michael? Tantrums. My ex broke up with me over the phone at 1:30 a.m. a few days before Christmas because I told him I was just going to hang out at my place that day and have a bath, do my nails and face mask, girly stuff like that. Apparently that was rude because our want for chill days away from each other should align. He was also scandalized when I said, okay, and refused to take him back. No thanks, crazy moron, I'm good. I love the stunned Pikachu face when someone finds out that you're actually fine with them leaving your life or business. Bluff called, motherfricker. Now grow up and learn to do your dishes. He will only clean what mess he makes. Oh, you made dinner. Clean the dishes you used. I'll wash my drinking glass since I filled it. Or he can't be wrong, misunderstand, misspeak, or not hear something correctly. I never said that. That's not something I'd say. Not seeing something from a different perspective, like picking your battles. A Mario Kart race is not worth throwing and destroying a controller, and say that he just felt cheated. We can't play certain games because he gets aggressive when he loses, or others are in the lead and complains up until he wins at the end. He does stuff to other people in the game that if done to him, he'd throw a tantrum over. Thinking of capricious reasons to cheat on their significant other because they can't man up to go through with a breakup. You can't really justify cheating at all, but I've heard of some really dumb freaking excuses over the years. He whines all the time. I've known him from age 37 to 60 and oh my, still just a complainer. He looked like the perfect catch on paper, but his emotional neediness and whining are a major turnoff. Tried the relationship, now trying friendship, but I just can't. For me, it would be a man who makes no effort to keep his home clean, who can't even cook the most rudimentary of meals, and who sees absolutely no problem with that. It shows a pretty marked immaturity that I don't have time to deal with. Not to mention that he'd better not even think that I'd automatically be glad to do all of this for him just because I'm a woman. And I'm not talking Martha Stewart levels of cooking and cleaning either. My place isn't spotless and I'm no gourmet chef, but I expect to see just enough to keep the health department away and maybe eat a home-cooked meal once or twice a week. Still completely dependent on the mother. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I know a guy who constantly whines about being single. He's 33. He'll crush on one girl for like 6 months without showing any sign of interest, finally work up the nerve to ask her out, get rejected and pine after her for another year or so, hoping she'll change her mind. Despite being objectively very unattractive, not having a career, relying on friends to rent him space well below market value, he'll only ever aim for girls that are like an 8 or higher. He has ridiculous criteria too. Refuses to date anyone taller than him, and he's like 5'7", or older than him, wants to marry into money, expects his future wife to be a homemaker raising their 5 to 8 kids, thinks doing the deed in anything other than missionary position with the lights off is gross. He's had girls interested in him before, girls who were definitely out of his league, and he never pursued anything because they were a couple of years older or a couple of inches taller than him. Yes, he's a complete man-child and I'm positive he'll die alone. And no, I'm not a woman, but 0 fricks given I'm not removing this comment. When the guy is in denial about calling anything you do together a date, but when you ask if what you're doing is a date or bring up the notion that it could be something other than a casual hookup, you're suddenly a psychotic stage 5 clinger who wants to get married and have 1,000,000 babies on a strict timeline. Jeez, dude. I just asked if you were on a date because it wasn't clear. I wasn't asking you to frickin' marry me. Oh boy, do I have a list from you from my first serious boyfriend. His mum made his lunch every day. PB&J, peanut butter cups, and little Debbie cakes. Just sugar, basically. He wanted to go out for breakfast every Sunday, but wouldn't get out of bed until I showed up at his house to wake him. He flipped out if I didn't text him every morning before I went to class, and called him every night before I went to bed. No, he couldn't be the one to call or text me, that was my job apparently. He punched inanimate objects when he was mad. Complained that I leaked bodily fluids on his sheets because he didn't want mummy to see them when she did his laundry. And this last one is really bizarre. He thought throwing soap at the wall when staying in a hotel was really fun and entertaining. Soap. Like in a hotel that had a TV that he was staying in for one night, not a windowless prison where he was forced to use his meager supply of toiletries to amuse himself. They're always telling you to let go of the inconsiderate things they do instead of owning up to them. Like it's not their fault they're being a jerk to you, you just need to not get so angry about it. Nothing is ever the man-child's fault, especially since he has his whole life ahead of him to grow and learn from all the faults he refuses to admit he has. The man-child has no need for future plans, he goes with the flow, and any attempt at suggestion that maybe a 30-year-old adult should at least have a vague idea of what they want to do in the next year or so of their lives is swiftly met with accusations of being controlling or pushy or uptight. When confronted with a fault that's undeniable, he lashes out at you for something you did years ago, or perhaps he just makes up something on the spot, or simply uses something positive as a negative. For instance, you just made breakfast, but because he's mad at you for pointing out something he didn't feel like acknowledging, he claims that you never make breakfast and the fact that you did doesn't count because you never do. In fact, accusations involving definitives, such as never, are constant. You never do anything, you never clean anything, you never do what I tell you to do. You're always never doing something, and on the off chance that you do, it doesn't count because you never do it. Won't put up with unpleasant shopping trips. I know a guy that throws the biggest fit if his wife goes off their shopping list or wants to make a stop somewhere else. She'll go with him to Best Buy while he looks at video games, but when she wants to stop at Bath & Body Works right next door, he freaks out and complains the second they walk in the door about how bored he is and pouts through the whole trip. Being proud of not reading. How involved his mummy is in his life. Good relationship with mum? Keeping in touch? Family holidays? Healthy boundaries? Maybe calls for advice when cooking something complicated or what the frick to do with silk? Good. When mum stops by the house all the time, stocks his fridge, brings him meals, does laundry, buys his clothes, cleans his house and has him over for dinner 3 nights a week? Bad. Mummy is telling him who he should and shouldn't date, what jobs he should have, what he should be doing with his money, or is still holding the apron strings after, say, 21? That's the worst, but not necessarily his fault. Other red flags: refusal to learn basic adult concepts like how to cook, clean, launder, or maintain things, and claiming it's someone else's job. Constantly shifting blame, living in a house that looks like it was decorated by a 15-year-old, inability to hold a conversation about anything more serious than TV, video games, or movies. The narrator will pipe in and try to answer the valid point that there are women who behave like this. Yes, they do exist. But it is a weird social phenomenon that in my experience this behavior does tend to manifest more in us guys. Either because society caters to us a bit more, or because of traditional gender roles. Who can say? Is 25, still lives with parents and doesn't pay rent. Doesn't do his own laundry and doesn't cook for himself. Doesn't take out the trash and hardly ever cleans his room. Spends all day on Reddit and only works part-time. Oh wait, that's me. Look, I'm working on it. Throws a tantrum when a news organization writes an article critical of him and then criticizes that organization for being fake news and declares the press to be an enemy of the American people. Oh my god, I almost married one. Here, have a list. Forces himself to dislike something just because you like it. You ever seen a grown man grit or grind his teeth while playing a video game you encouraged him to try? I have. Fussy eater. Won't eat anything that isn't pizza or burgers and has zero interest in broadening his culinary horizons. I was sympathetic at first, but he aggressively refused all of my suggestions. Owns various books on get-rich-quick schemes. I know, I probably should have left them right then and there. Spontaneous vehicle purchases. He owns a classic car from high school that he refuses to part with, but never drives it, works on it, or does anything with it except keep it insured and have difficulty finding places to park it. He had this facade of being handy, but every time he'd set out to do something handy, he needed someone else there to help him. I'd James to come over and help me with the brakes on my car. I called my dad to help with the tile backsplash in our kitchen. Stuff like that. And then they'd just end up doing it for him. Makes fun of the things you like. Pay attention to this, seriously. A normal guy should be able to appreciate that you like things, even if they're different from the things that he likes. He outright mocked me for enjoying certain video games that weren't the kill, loot, instant gratification variety. A man appreciates and respects your choices. A child points and laughs at the things you like. Wants the house perfectly spotless, but will never do anything to get off his lazy butt to help with that. Works a part-time job and refuses to consider trying to go back to school or do really anything to get him out of the situation that isn't whining about not getting a promotion after working sorting mail for nearly 10 years. Honestly, liberal arts degree. Such entitlement. Wow. Wants a dog? Gets a dog. Does absolutely F all with taking care of or cleaning up after or training the dog. Doesn't want to have kids yet because then he'll have to share his toys. Seriously. He's not being funny when he says crap like this. He's legitimately a greedy, selfish man-baby, and you should not procreate with him. Learn from my almost mistake. Run. Buys expensive things right after you tell him not to buy those things and then expects it to just be okay. Always talks about having a ton of money coming in. Truth is, he has no money coming in, just entitlement issues up the wazoo. He wants to dazzle you with cash he doesn't actually have. Wants to become a lawyer. Has no interest in actually putting any effort into becoming a lawyer. In truth, he actually just wants to argue more and get away with saying stupid crap in front of a judge. This is not the kind of person who becomes a lawyer. Any freaking time he playfully whines about something, but I want to see X movie, not Y, but I want a new one because mine's not working properly. Stuff like that, and then playfully laughs. Pro tip, it's not fake whining to be funny, it's actual whining disguised as fake funny whining. Just stay away from any and all whining. Having his mother appear on your doorstep at random freaking times to attack you after you dump him and he kicks himself out. That was fun. Not. They were looking in my freaking windows to see if I was home. Sending endless long texts and emails after you dump him saying he's entitled to spousal support and you paying off all of his debt that he accrued without your input, even though he's left you with 2 pets and a house you can barely afford to pay on your own. That was actually fun. I forwarded everything to my family lawyer to discredit him. Really, he did it all himself. His relatives post vaguely on their Facebook about how they're happy in their marriages or whatever, and would never treat their spouses like that. Translation: Man baby has been crying to his entire family, "You're the scum of the earth, how dare you find fault in this perfect cinnamon roll?" And probably the biggest one, talks a lot about stuff he wants, never actually puts forward any effort into getting it. Never. He just expects it to magically happen without his input at all. Everything you do annoys him. Literally everything. How dare you listen to music while you cook or clean? How dare you soak potting soil in the sink for plant pots? It's so dirty even though it takes less than a minute to wipe up. How dare you get back into painting? That's money I could spend on pizza. How dare you order off the dinner menu? Never mind that I go for lunch twice a week with my friend Kyle. It's so expensive when I eat out with you maybe twice a year. If you upset his happy norm by existing, you're sure to hear some whining about it. We were together nearly 5 years. I'm sure I'll come up with more. Furiously taking notes. Just passing by, don't worry about me. One that I haven't seen mentioned yet is pickup artistry. It covers all manner of insecurity, immaturity, or lack of personal growth, by doubling down on the objectifying of women. See, it's not so bad to get rejected by a girl if she's just one of 20 meat socks you're pursuing at a time. They try something once, and when it doesn't immediately work for them, they wallow in self-pity rather than try again. I can't ask out a girl, I got rejected once and it hurts too bad. I can't exercise, I ran a mile once and it didn't do anything. I tried to learn a foreign language once, but it took too long. All actual quotes from the man-children in my life. Something I haven't seen mentioned yet is finances. Man-children typically either don't work, or if they do, they'll work part-time at a minimum wage job. They'll call in on the weekends because they want to party, and they're just too lazy to actually put in effort to work more. Unless they're rich and are used to daddy buying everything for them, they never have much money. They're always broke when it comes time to pay the rent or the electric bill, but they mysteriously always have money to buy video games or green herb. How did your parents manipulate you to make parenting easier? When I was young, my parents brought home this very fancy maple syrup from Toronto, and I fell in love with it. We used it a few times and then they told me it had run out, so we were using a normal version like Aunt Jemima's or something. Apparently, I threw a temper tantrum. From then on, I'd be a little monster if we didn't use the expensive syrup. Today, we made waffles while I was visiting home for a week, and my mum mentioned how she had just put Aunt Jemima's back into the fancy maple syrup bottle, and how I'd always say something like, "See, Mum, I can taste the difference." For 10 years, my parents have been laughing at my jerkishness. When I was a kid, we'd take long family trips to Ohio to visit my grandparents. I absolutely loved these trips. My grandparents had all sorts of cool stuff in the house, 2 big apple trees in the front yard, and they lived next to a train track. My grandpa also loved Golden Grahams. Every time my brothers and I would visit, he'd open his cupboard to reveal 4 or 5 boxes of Golden Grahams, explaining how much he loved them and that he got extra boxes just because we were visiting. I always thought it was so cool that my grandpa, who was, old, had the same favorite cereal as me. I'd always feast on cereal every time we went to visit. Of course, years after he died, I was relating this story to someone, and the obvious dawned on me. Later, I asked my mother if Grandpa even liked Golden Grahams, and she got this big smile on her face, looked a little sad, and said, "No, but he knew you did." It broke my heart. Still the story I tell when I remember him. When I was a kid, I had a pet hamster that I loved, as he'd walk up my arm and sleep on my shoulder. Fast forward to age 16, my dad and I were talking about my childhood, and he let slip, "Oh, you mean hamster 1 or hamster 2? What? Was my reaction. Turns out my dad accidentally left my hamster's cage in the sun and my hamster dehydrated. Then, to make it better, they had the cage on their bed as they were deciding what to do, and I came in, pet the dead hamster and said, "Bye, I'll see you later after school." My dad went to get a new hamster that day, and when I got back from school, he said I was ecstatic that my hamster got bigger. My mum confirmed the story. The monster juice that my mum would spray around my room to keep monsters out? That was actually just water with a large amount of my dad's cologne sprayed into it. I used to just spew out random numbers to my mum, telling to add, subtract, and multiply, and she'd in turn tell me what the final number would be. It blew my mind, and she was the damn smartest person on the planet. Then I got clever. One day I got a calculator out to make sure she had it right. She did not. I do have to wonder at what point these fun little mistruths cross over into damaging stuff for us when we're kids. I honestly think it's so hard to know where to draw the line, and even varies from child to child as well. Parenting is a minefield. My mum used to turn the clocks forward when I had sleepovers at her house. She'd run in to change the clock from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. while we were distracted. This was before we had cell phones, you see. We'd be amazed at how fast time had gone. We'd stay up really late, in quotes, and then fall asleep confident in our coolness. And she actually got to go to sleep at a decent hour without making us all shut up 6 times in the middle of the night. Now that I'm older and value my sleep, I think she's a frickin' genius. When I was in kindergarten, all of my friends would go to Disney World and talk about all of the rides they went on. I was really jealous because I'd never been. My parents didn't want to pay for a plane ride from Massachusetts to Florida. Every day I'd cry and cry just begging to go. One day in the middle of the week, they just gave in and said, "Okay, we would go." I was psyched. We went on the horse that goes back and forth and we got necklaces. We also saw a lot of couches and chairs and other furniture. The next day in class, I told all of my friends that I went to Disney World yesterday. They were amazed that I only went in one day. Turns out we'd actually gone to Jordan's Furniture, and my parents told me it was Disney World. In short, my parents tricked me into thinking that Jordan's furniture was Disney World. My realization about my parents came pretty early in my life. When I was very young, I came downstairs at 4 in the morning to witness my dad, half asleep and wearing nothing but his undies, placing presents under the Christmas tree while shoving the cookies we left out for Santa into his face. His reaction? A relative of mine tells her kid that if she behaves well at school for 5 days in a row, she can have 2 days off school. The kid has no idea that's the weekend. For a good portion of my childhood, I thought we were just eating a different brand of tomato sauce. Turns out my mum had been liquefying carrots and putting them into the sauce to get us more veggies. It took me years to know that tomato sauce should not be orange. My husband's mother would always put 1% milk in the 2% jug simply because his brother swore that he didn't like 1%. The brother never knew the difference. Mom, why did the milk expire 2 years ago? This happened to a family we knew. The mum spent months slowly switching the rest of the family from whole milk to skim milk. She kept the same jug and would mix up increasing portions of skim. Finally, one day the daughter noticed the year-old expiration date, gagged and spat milk all over the kitchen, screaming that the mum was trying to kill them all. On my 21st birthday, my parents took myself and my housemates out for an early dinner, so as not to interfere with the festivities we'd planned later on. At that dinner, my dad flipped my world upside down. When I was 10 and my brother was 7, we'd taken a family trip to the Liberty Science Center, which, for those of you not in the New Jersey area, is essentially a neat multi-story playhouse full of science-related activities designed for kids. They have an IMAX theater attached that plays interesting documentaries. For a while, they had a touch tunnel where you could crawl through an extended area in complete darkness, and several demonstrations on different floors with everything from insects to the classic shattering a banana frozen with liquid nitrogen routine. To my parents' credit, they had me interested in science from a very young age, so this was a real treat for my brother and I. However, since we were still 10 and 7, we couldn't stand to be stuck in a car for more than an hour without bickering with each other. After fighting almost the entire way there, my dad laid down the law. If I hear one more word out of either of you, I'm turning the car around. A deafening silence reigned over the rest of the car ride until we were literally pulling into the parking lot when one of us, I can't remember who, said something snarky, and my dad, true to his word, turned that car around and we drove all the way home. Fast forward to this 21st birthday at dinner, the story happened to be brought up, as I tend to use it as an example of how, while my dad was really cool, he was not one to F with. My dad then revealed a life-changing secret that only he and my mother had known. They'd never intended to actually drive all the way home after the long ride. They just wanted us to get the message. However, my dad misinterpreted some of the traffic signs and ended up back on the Garden State Parkway, which has few and far between opportunities to turn around, so he just took us home. The entire thing was an accident, but they played that off as intentional for the sake of their parental authority. They did take us back the following weekend because you bet your butt we were the most behaved children on the planet for the next few days. In short, I thought my dad was a stalwart authority figure who meant every word he said, but in reality, he's just really bad at reading street signs. When I was a kid, we had a pet bird, Bart the bird, and he could talk. For years, I recalled with great fondness talking to Bart and Bart answering back. Well, not too long ago, I asked my dad what type of bird Bart was. Surely he was some form of parrot, and I just never put it together because I'd been so young. My dad then broke the news that Bart had never talked, that he'd stand not far off in the other room or a few steps behind me and talk for the bird. I don't think I've ever felt the carpet be pulled so quickly from under my feet. You don't know how many people I've told about Bart the talking bird. Every time we went to the hairdresser, they'd mess it up. At the time, I really preferred long hair, and they'd always cut it way too short and in styles I didn't like. Eventually, I decided that all professional hairdressers were huge screw-ups who didn't listen, and I was going to take matters into my own hands. I've been cutting my own hair since I was 15. I'm 23 now and actually pretty damn good at it. Just a few months ago, I was over at their place for dinner, and my mum casually mentions that she'd always told the hairdressers to ignore what I said and cut it in a certain way. I was floored. I'd lost faith in the entire industry. I'd had crappy hair for years and years between their crappy cuts and mine before I knew what I was doing. That stuff probably changed the course of my life in some way. As a kid, my best friend used to go on and on about how he couldn't eat the generic cereals. He had to have the name brand. How he could just taste the lower quality. Well, one night we were having a sleepover, I woke up pretty early in the morning and went upstairs to use the bathroom. In the kitchen was his mum filling the Fruit Loops from a bag of the generic stuff. She saw me, smiled, and said, "Shh." I never told my friend. That's awesome, and that mum is being economical and saving herself a great deal of needless whining. However, given the smarty little crap-eating brat that I was, you can bet that I would have been rubbing my friend's face in it starting immediately. As a kid, you were a better guy than I was. When I was like 3 or 4, I got a toy telephone car that lit up and said things when you pressed the numbers for my birthday. I played with it all day, and I didn't even question the fact that my mum didn't let me take it out of the box. 3 days later, I couldn't find it anywhere, and when I asked my mum, she told me that she'd had to return it to the store because it was infested with ants. Being a kid, I didn't think much of it, and just went back to watching Sesame Street or whatever. A few years ago, I told my mum that I still remembered that story, and she told me what had really happened. My family had just come over to the States from Nepal, and we barely had any money. My dad was getting a degree at the university, working a job and paying for our bills and his tuition at the same time. So it turns out my parents couldn't actually afford any presents for my birthday, but they wanted me to at least have something to play with, even for a little while. They bought me that toy so I'd be happy, and then had to return it a few days later. Apparently my mum left the room and cried for a solid hour after I'd asked her what happened to it when I was a kid. I had to hold back my own tears when they told me. In short, I frickin' love my parents. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was about 5 years old, my aunt and uncle got full custody of me because my mother chose her horrible boyfriend over me. Over the next few years, I'd visit her on some weekends to see my siblings. As time went on, I saw less and less of her, until one day she just stopped coming over, stopped calling, and disappeared. No big surprise because she was a shady human being anyway. One day, during a rare moment of seeing her, she basically asked why I wasn't happy to see her. I went the F off about how she was a crappy mother for not only giving me away, but also completely abandoning me. My aunt did step in and say, well, she stopped calling and visiting because we told her to. Finding that out didn't fix anything between my mother and I, but until I was much older and realized my aunt and uncle did the best thing they could for me, I felt pretty betrayed. Wasn't really a bomb my mum dropped on me, but a bomb I unwittingly opened. I was trying to get a job at several places when I was 16. I was pretty tech-savvy at the time and genuinely thought I could get a job working a help desk for a power company, a bank, and a few other places. I started to check the mail every day to see if I'd gotten a letter, since I wasn't sure they'd send me a letter, email, or call. I got a few letters from the places I'd applied to, and I was excited to open them. They were bills of significant debt, all defaulted on. My mum had said she'd pay them back and close it. I believed her, so I dropped it. I didn't know how credit worked back then, and I didn't know what extremes my mother would go to. A few years later, several years after graduating and entering the workforce, I tried to get credit on my own and got flat denied by everyone. I got letters from collectors representing the companies that my mum had opened accounts with under my name. They said the bills were never paid on. I claimed identity theft and managed to get the responsibility shifted off myself and onto my mum after filing a police report and talking to several companies over the phones across the span of several months. All of them said that she had opened the account in my name by claiming she was my wife. In short, my mum stole my identity as a kid and claimed she was my wife. I learned to hate Mother's Day. My favorite toys would go missing. Turns out they destroyed them because they made too much noise. My stepdad claimed he never had the right size batteries for my toys. Yeah, it's because your mom used them all up. My dad used to call me into the bathroom to look at his number 2. I was always shocked out of my mind. It looked like little stars and perfect circles and even dog bones. I couldn't figure out why my doo-doo always looked stupid. Turns out he was throwing dog food into the toilet and waiting for it to bloat up before calling me in. I'm glad to say I've inherited my dad's sense of humor. My mum told me she could see through walls. She always knew when I was playing and not trying to go to bed, so I believed her for years. Turns out my nightlight cast a very bright shadow on the wall, and she would use that to see if I was in bed or not. My parents would set the clock 2 hours ahead on New Year's Eve and then take my siblings and I out for dinner so we wouldn't notice, and then wind up going to bed at 10 instead of midnight. I recently found out at age 20 that the zebra my aunt purchased for her farm when I was a kid did not in fact die from being unable to handle the environment of upstate New York, rather it was trampled to death by her llamas. Don't mess with llamas. To clarify a couple of things, the original story wasn't that the zebra froze to death in a winter storm, but that it was chronically ill from the wet and cold weather and eventually succumbed to his illness. Also, I have no idea how she acquired said zebra. She had an ostrich too, and that thing was mean as hell. My mum used to hold me up to the arcade machines and let me believe that I was playing, even though it was just the demo and title sequence. I remember getting really frustrated that I'd die at the same part every single time. For years and years, my dad, a single parent, would make grilled cheese for me by toasting bread and putting cheese on it. It was cool. Years later, I discovered at one point, while my grandma was visiting, she attempted to make me a grilled cheese the normal way. Pan, butter, deliciousness. But my dad stopped her, saying, "No, then he'll know that that exists." Also, I was invited to Neverland Ranch as a kid, but my dad didn't let me go, nor did he even tell me I was invited. Lastly, I was in Cub Scouts, but only participated in local meetings, wondering why we never did campouts or anything. I just thought it was something our troop didn't do. Recently found out that there were campouts. My dad just thought they were all buttholes, so he didn't let me go. Or tell me that they existed. My childhood was unique. My first pet was a dog I named Sparky. I had him for about 2 weeks, then one day I came back from school with my dad telling me he'd run away. I looked for that dog and set up missing posters for weeks. Turns out they gave him back to the pound they adopted him from because we couldn't afford to keep him. I remember when I was a little girl, all I wanted was to see the movie Matilda. My parents wanted to just see The Nutty Professor. So they took us to see The Nutty Professor and told me that it was Matilda. I just kept waiting and waiting. It wasn't until the end of the movie that I realized my parents were jerks. I don't know who would want to go and see that solid C of an Eddie Murphy film over the pretty solid hit that Matilda was. But regardless, I think this deception probably crosses that line we talked about earlier, from white lie to just harming your child's trust. My mum, a few times when my brothers and I were young, would turn all the lights off in the house. She'd tell us to go get our sleeping bags and bring them into the living room while she put a couple of tents together. She'd then get candles and put them in a small pile and call it a fire. This little maneuver was called camping inside. We weren't allowed to watch TV or play any video games because we were camping. She read us Goosebumps stories and we played flashlight tag. It was always fun. Cut to when I was first starting out in the world, I was having financial trouble and was consoling my mother for comfort. She told me that she's been down that road and you always pull through. I asked her to explain. She said that when we were younger, sometimes she couldn't afford to pay the power bill, and that when it was apparent that it would be shut off, then she knew it was time to go indoor camping. She did that so that none of us would ever worry or think that we wouldn't be okay. That story made me smile. I love my mum. When I was 4 years old, we didn't have a car. My mum would pick me up from daycare and then we'd walk home. Whenever I said that I was too tired to walk anymore, my mum would say, "Okay, I'll give you some energy." She'd hold my hand and make a bzzz noise as if sending me energy. Then she'd ask me if I'd had enough now. I'd say yes and would keep walking. I love my mum. When I was a kid, my favorite cereal was Cap'n Crunch's Crunch Berries. If given the opportunity, I'd eat nothing else. So for years, my mother had me believing they were only available during Christmas. So about 6 years ago, I was in a store with my ex and I see them. I explained how much I loved them as a child and we should get some. Then I realized it was July. I got really excited and even regressed a little, I think. It was then gently explained to me that I'd been duped. I'm eating Captain Crunch Berries right the frick now though, so all's well that ends well, I suppose. I used to hate whole wheat bread. My parents convinced me that it was just part toasted white bread so that I'd eat it. When I was a teenager, my grandma, who was suffering from stage 4 throat cancer, decided that she wanted to air out her secrets before she died. She filled me in that my childhood cat Charlie didn't die from old age like they'd told me, but her and my parents had put him down while I was at school one day. I was distraught. Looking back though, I can understand why they did it. Oh, and she also told me that Dad was married before my mum and I have a much older half-brother. It's been a deep, dark family secret forever. My parents still don't know I know. Maybe I should have been more upset about that than the cat. 15-year-olds are frickin' lame. I'm sorry to all those 15-year-olds out there. You'll see. My mum bought me Mega Blocks and put them into an old Lego container once. Bullcrap. What a monster. I used to have a cat when I was about 3 named Sia, and I loved her. She was a Siamese-looking cat, and I had her like 2 years. When I was 5, she got really sick while I was at school, and my parents took her to the vet. After about 2 weeks of asking my parents how Sia was, she finally came home. Now, Sia's going to be a bit pale because she's sick, and she might act a bit funny. Being in the hospital is scary. That's what my parents told me. So Sia came home, and she was a lot paler than I remember, almost greyish-white. She also climbed behind the sofa, refused to come out, and hissed at anyone who went near her. She eventually calmed down, but didn't sleep in my room as per usual. She slept on the rafters in the basement instead. Turns out, I found this out about 6 months ago, my dad started up the lawnmower and Sia was somehow inside the lawnmower near the blade and, well, bad kitty times happened really quickly. They replaced Sia with one they found at the shelter, and the little moron that was me didn't notice. Oh, the ice cream truck just plays music when they're out of ice cream for the day. Don't bother going outside, sweetie. My dad once told me that fried calamari was just fried chicken to get me to eat it, assuming that I'd like it, and he could tell me afterwards, you ate squid and you liked it. Joke was on him though, it turns out I'm deathly allergic to squid. I'm also severely allergic to fish, shellfish, seaweed, and most mollusks. Basically, if it swims, it kills me, with the obvious exception of swimming mammals, though most of them are also deadly. What weird thing would you make socially acceptable if you could? Asking a potential employer what the salary for a position is before jumping through 50 hoops with the application and interview process, only to find out it pays garbage. Calling out customers for being rude. I had a job as a teller at a credit union back in college, and I'll always say the manager I had was one of the best I've ever worked with. I once had a lady who kept asking me for a new credit card and handed me her debit card. I looked on her account and said, there is no credit card, there's a debit card, which is what this is, but that's the only card on this account. I can issue you a new one with no problem, but if you want a credit card, you'll have to fill out an application. She was adamant that what she had was in fact a credit card. No matter what I told her, she said it was a credit card and demanded a new one. At one point she said, are you stupid or something? To which my manager overheard, pushed me out of the way and said, you will not speak to him that way, and if you're going to continue behaving this way, you're going to have to leave. I won't tolerate you speaking to my employees like that. I wish more managers were like her. I'm a guy and I get a lot of flack for complimenting people's clothing. I don't think it's weird, but apparently it means I must like men. If you've got nice shoes, I'm going to say they're nice shoes. As a woman who's dating a man who's very fashion-forward and compliments things like that constantly, I highly encourage this. Compliments from women about your clothes is one thing, because we compliment everything and your dog, but from a man, it just hits different. We should destroy the thought that the customer is always right. Draping myself in velvet. Complimenting other men. Being able to sit in silence with someone without it being awkward. People shouldn't feel obligated to come up with conversation, it makes interacting stressful. I don't believe in awkward silences. Talk about something when it comes to you and conversations will always feel more real and interesting. When you're able to sit in silence with someone comfortably, I feel it shows you enjoy their company. Me and my best friend sometimes do this. We order food a lot and find a deserted place, usually the roof of some building, and we just sit there eating. Most of the time we talk, but those moments of tranquility and peace are really nice. Best friend I ever had. We still don't talk sometimes. The narrator is probably a lot of people's worst nightmare when it comes to not being able to hold silences. You know that insufferable person who'll wait less than 10 seconds into a comfortable silence before asking a question to get the conversation started again? Hi, it's me. Being able to be honest about how you feel without being bullied or belittled. Being able to just wave or say hi to people you hardly know. There's nothing worse than an awkward 5-minute catch-up chat at the store with someone I haven't seen in years. Sitting, on the floor or anywhere really. Cashiers need to be allowed to sit, the fact that most places don't let them is a load of BS. If other people are at my house having fun but I'm tired, I just want to be able to go to bed, but they can stay and have a good time. My dad doesn't say anything at all, he just disappears. Later you'll find him watching reruns of CSI Miami in his room, munching on gummy candies. He does not care. Openly talking about your finances with other people. A lot of people don't realize they're underpaid because nobody talks about wages. It's so bizarre to me that it's a taboo subject. We all rely on money in some form, let's just discuss it. I just wanted to state that finances, in my view, include things like how much debt you have, what your rent and other bills are, how much you have saved, stuff like that. I can see how there'd be negatives to discussing your salary with coworkers or family, but in my opinion, the negatives brought up that I've read from the replies don't bother me. The people who'd be offended or have expectations of me are not people that I'd end up highly valuing their opinion. If I'm doing better than a family member or friend and they need help, I'll help them. But if they're jealous, greedy, or generally not supportive, then I don't need them in my life. People in the service industry should be able to tell a customer when they're being a butthole. My old boss from when I worked retail flat out told me on my first day that so long as I wasn't being a total jerk, he'd always have my back if a customer was being a butt, and I didn't bend over backwards for them. He banned a couple of people from the store over their antics while I was there, and it blew a couple of Karens' minds when he told them to shut up and act their age, when they tried their usual screaming fest. I loved that job. I'd like to make it socially acceptable to tell employers that you're only in it for the money and it be a legitimate answer. What, am I supposed to tell employers that I've always wanted to work a part-time job and get yelled at by Karens just so I could make ends meet? Eating alone at a restaurant or a solo movie trip. I mean, sort of limited now due to the pandemic, but before COVID, when people would hear of me doing that, they said they felt terrible and how depressing it sounded. I was like, why? It's just another day for me. It doesn't feel weird or anything. It's quite nice to get away from constant chats and have a nice quiet meal while being out and about. Neutral facial expressions. People act like anything that isn't definitely a smile is some sort of insult. It's another reason to appreciate masks. What's the matter? Absolutely nothing. This is my face. Having your work ethic, not your butt-kissing skills, prioritized and appreciated, both in jobs and in school. Staying silent if you really don't have anything to say. Short naps at work. Wearing cloaks, Lord of the Rings style. Screw jackets. All of my homies wear medieval cloaks. I dig this idea. Outfits can be so boring. I want to go out dressed like the Mandalorian or something. Taking a social time out without having to smoke or occupy the bathroom. My workday is 6 to 8 hours, it's an open-plan office, lunch is social, and I have at least an hour commute per day. That is at least twice my maximum social energy per day. Similarly, not being expected to socialize with coworkers during my lunch hour. I desperately need the alone time to recharge, but I'm sure people think I'm an antisocial butthole because I'll straight get up and walk out if someone comes into the kitchen while I'm there. I'll greet them quickly and be nice, but I have to get the frick out before the inevitable small talk starts or I'll lose my crap. Staying home when sick. I really hoped this pandemic would improve the mindset, but nope, people still think you're a lazy piece of crap if you stay home when you're sick. I've always genuinely gotten mad when people came to work sick. A long time ago, I was a restaurant manager, and I just didn't understand why my GM insisted that sick people come in and hack up all over the food. We were almost never truly understaffed. I moved to a corporate call support job and I thought it would be better. Nope. People were afraid of losing their jobs, so they came in no matter what because it was expected, even when it resulted in exponentially more sick people, which led to a loss in productivity. We were a frickin' software company where every employee technically had full remote capabilities, yet it took a frickin' global pandemic to normalize working from home. Dressing however you want. Makeup, dresses, medieval cloaks, whatever you want, regardless of gender too. That'd be nice. I think people should be able to wear whatever they want as long as it covers things most people don't want to see. Just walk around in cosplay if you want to. I wish everyone felt comfortable to dress however they'd want to. Being awake late at night and sleeping all morning. I've been like this since I was a kid. Circadian rhythm is just backwards. I can't fall asleep before 3 a.m. I wish people didn't treat me like I was lazy or something. I'm a pretty productive guy. I just get my work done while you're all asleep. I do not understand people like you at all, sir or madam, but maybe if we occupy the same desk we can produce an epic amount of work from one centralized spot, because I get the vast majority of my work done before midday. 4-day work weeks. Staying completely silent in other people's company. I wish that people would stop conflating women not wearing makeup with being unprofessional. I worked in a place where a girl was told she looked unprofessional when she didn't wear makeup. Yikes. The IRS telling you how much you owe in taxes. The IRS actually wants to do this. They're blocked by lobbying from the tax accounting industry. In virtually every situation in America when you can ask, why aren't we doing this obvious thing that's obviously better, the answer is corporate lobbyists. Hell, the reason daylight savings time isn't permanent, i.e. we stop moving the clocks back and forward, is largely due to TV lobbyists who want it to get dark early so that we sit at home watching TV. Running in public to get to places quicker. Back when I actually went to the office in the city, I remember seeing this one woman a few different times running, and not in your typical running clothes, but in a business suit during your typical rush hour times. The first time I thought she must be late to something. A few more times and I thought, wow, this lady is always late. Finally, I just decided she must just like running to or from places. Being able to take a day off because you just want to, as opposed to having to come up with an excuse. For myself in the UK, there's a bit in the leave application for details, but everyone leaves it blank. No boss cares unless it might screw up a project. Wearing nicer clothes than normal for no reason. Yes, I'm usually in jeans and a t-shirt at work. Yes, today I decided to wear a suit. No, I don't have a job interview or have to go to court. Wearing shorts at work during summer. Why wear pants when you could be more comfortable? I worked in an office where shorts were allowed but not jeans. The CEO had some kind of weird anti-denim hang-up. No jorts and no denim skirts either. I quit after 3 months for many other reasons. Not wearing a bra. I feel like everyone notices when I don't wear one in public and other women give rude looks. I just want to be comfortable. Not being always productive and not devoting one's life to making money. Yes, siestas in the middle of the workday. Please. Capes. No capes. Although I will say that Director Krennic's cape was Superfly. I would also accept Doctor Strange's flying cloak if you've come to bargain. Correcting other people's kids. Not physically, but telling them to quit their bullcrap if their parents aren't doing it. Yes, and also being able to comment on parents being negligent with correcting their kids in public settings like restaurants. If your kid is throwing food around and you do nothing to stop it, I want to hold you accountable without you making a scene, please. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Walking my pig on a leash. When my dog was a puppy, we met a guy walking his pig on a leash. My dog was so confused, he just rolled over and showed it his belly. Skipping. It's more fun and energy efficient than running. I sometimes do it when I'm alone because I like the way it feels. Probably readjusting your sack. I hate it when mine gets stuck in a weird spot, but I can't move it until I get home. Talking about our mental health issues. We all face some level of depression or anxiety. Why are we lying and pretending to be happy all the time? You know that thing we all do where we're walking and suddenly realize we're going the wrong direction or need to change direction, so we stop, pull out our phones, pretend like we read something, and then start walking off in a new direction? Yeah, I'd just start randomly changing directions on the fly. Is this actually a thing? I'd just turn around. No one gives a shot what I'm doing. I'm just some random walking down the street. Why would they care if I turn around? Men should be allowed to express emotions without being seen as weak. It upsets me to see people in pain due to things that aren't their fault. Going out in more costume-style clothing. I'm not talking about overpriced Halloween store crap either. I mean being able to walk around in full Victorian-era clothing, Jedi robes, or good pirate wear. I'm tired of looking normal, damn it. Introverts being allowed to skip parties without being judged. As wonderful as that would be, I don't think that would ever kill the FOMO for some of them. Personal feelings aren't likely to change that much based on how acceptable it is to skip a party. Frilly dresses for adults. Am I the only one? I loved wearing them at Christmas and Easter as a little girl. Now, I feel like I can't get away with it. Satin, lace, pastel-covered ruffles, puffy sleeves, embroidered flowers and ribbons, a skirt that flies out when you spin around, maybe even a corset. Looks silly on a grown woman, especially if everyone else is wearing blue jeans and t-shirts. I just sure miss dressing up like that. Classifying women not wearing makeup as lazy and normalizing a fresh face on women, even to formal events. Sure, it looks nice, but can't a lady just rock some nice hair and a fancy outfit the same way men do? I was going to write along the lines of wearing little to no makeup becoming more socially acceptable versus the way it's interpreted now. I hate the generic responses of, "Oh, you didn't have time? I have some cosmetics in my purse. Are you okay? You look sick." You know, all that usual stuff. Men hugging each other often and showing affection. I used to see this when I was younger, then I think as a society we just decided to label such behavior as gay. Not drinking alcohol at gatherings. Dressing for comfort over style. I want to live in a world where it's perfectly fine to show up at a job interview in a sweatshirt. The need to wear nice clothes is an arbitrary rule we created for ourselves. Women also being able to skip wearing anything on their torso. It sucks that in hot weather, men and kids can roam around shirtless, but a woman can practically get arrested in some places for having her chest on display. Bras and bikini tops are freaking uncomfortable, not to mention the rubbish tan lines. I mean, at least people have started to make feeding your baby in public less of an issue, so who knows? Maybe I'll be able to pull them out in a few years. As a flat-chested woman, this annoys me the most. Those fat old dudes who have bigger melons than me can walk around freely shirtless, but if I show some skin, suddenly I'm a predator of some sort. Mothers can't even naturally feed their babies without getting shamed. I hate the South. Telling someone you're child-free or don't want children without being told, "You'll change your mind," and other related nonsense. Unfortunately, a lot of people find us odd or not real women for being uninterested in having children. It's not for everyone. Swinging around toy lightsabers when you're a teenager or adult. Abruptly leaving conversations that you don't want to participate in. For example, one could simply declare, "This bores me, goodbye," and then promptly depart. Going to the bathroom for 15 minutes. Let men drink sweet cocktails without being judged. Being asexual or aromantic. Uncomfortable silences. Why do we feel it's necessary to yak about BS in order to be comfortable? Being nice to kids. As a man, I'd just say talking to kids that aren't yours. Moms catch me just casually chatting with their kid and they get all defensive because I'm a stranger. It's tragic as a society that we live in constant fear and instill distrust in our children. I want to dance anywhere in public. No, I'm not on anything, I just love to dance. Not talking or smiling to anyone in public. It has nothing to do with you. People aren't happy all the time, and sometimes I just want to get in and get out. Walking cats on leashes or in strollers. I walk my elderly cat in a stroller. She has kidney disease and likes to threaten birds. I'm determined to give her this beautiful retirement. Screw what other people think. Just being able to walk around wearing only your skin without people deciding that you're randy or an exhibitionist or whatever. Being free of clothes in the sun is an experience I wish everyone could have. Wearing cute childish stuff. People giving weird looks kinda ruins the fun. I personally don't think it's weird, but the majority of my country thinks it is. I'd make gay marriage legal in my country. Here in Hungary, it's an unaccepted thing. Saying the phrase, "I'm happy" or "this makes me happy." One time I made the mistake of saying that about my hobbies, and the person I talked to looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. As adult people, it's frowned upon to make emotional remarks, and it shouldn't have to be weird if you want to share it. Besides, being or feeling happy is a disposition per se, and shouldn't have to relate to being an emotional talk. It's exhausting having to give explanations. Top hats and capes. Dumpster diving. As a society, we throw away so much, normalizing dumpster diving would save a lot of salvageable items from going into a landfill. No chit-chat as a social default. Man, this one just keeps coming up, huh? Again, I think I'm a villain to a lot of people who desire this. Maybe I'll just try shutting my pie hole next time silence hits. Not wanting to work hard. Not as in not wanting to have a job, but openly being able to admit that the prospect of working at least 35 hours a week for most of your life is insanely depressing and unappealing. Wearing a mask to not spread viruses. Requiring employers to post a salary on job posts. Everyone can stop wasting time this way. Plus, better chance at fair wages. A lot of things people seem to find weird that are actually harmless. Stimming, humming, hand flapping, preferring not to communicate verbally, enjoying quiet or being unintentionally loud. I guess I just like to normalize being polite. Let people be odd as long as they're harmless. For the past 6 years, I've been sleeping with him in exchange for discounts on our supplies and Outback Steakhouse gift certificates. People wearing masks. I love putting mine on so people don't see my face. Not wanting to hustle or make someone else rich. I don't want to put in 60 work hours so I can have a materially successful life. Dungeons and Dragons. It's not really as weird as people think. It's acting. We watch TV, movies, plays, it's not any different. And you're playing a board game at the same time. People really need to get over the whole satanic panic thing. It's not devil worship, and it's not really all that weird. It's a much more social activity and more mentally stimulating than binging Netflix or playing video games, and it's helped me make and sustain great friendships. A friend started DMing for a group of friends that I've never played before during the pandemic, and I've got to say it's the night of the week that I look forward to the most. But not just do stupid Zoom calls where we talk about COVID for an hour. Also, my character is part of my soul now. It's insane how quickly I connected to the guy. Men should be able to wear skirts and dresses. Sometimes we need some air down there and to look cute. And yes, I know kilts exist, but that's the Scots thing. Let people like what they like without being bullied for it. Not ironing our clothes. Like seriously, they don't really look worse if you don't do it, and if no one did it, we'd save so much time. Not shaving your legs. It's so wild to me that the assumption is that women should shave their legs because men think they'll look prettier that way. But men don't need to shave their legs because apparently women wouldn't think men would look prettier with shaved legs? Wearing the same attire every day. Not the same pair as the previous day, but the same type of shirts and pants. Carrying around stuffed animals. They make me happy. I used to work at restaurants, and some employees were allowed to take breaks to smoke. I didn't smoke, so I never got any breaks. Every now and then, I'd just go stand in the walk-in freezer to cool off after I'd been running around the restaurant. My peers didn't like that I randomly disappeared for 5 minutes every now and then. I told them it's my smoke break. So I feel like short 5-minute breaks should just be allowed even if you're not a smoker. Platonic cuddling. Doing things later in the day, getting groceries at 10 p.m. or spa appointments at 8 p.m. and able to do vacuuming in my condo at midnight without my neighbors complaining. Society is set up for a 9-to-5 life. I agree with everything you've said except vacuuming at midnight. That would make me so angry. Whether I like it or not, I have to be up early, and hearing someone vacuum at midnight is just a jerk move. Do the stuff that would affect others during normal hours and do the quiet stuff on your schedule. 4-day work week. Men should be allowed to call their male friends their boyfriends, as ladies can call her female friends her girlfriends. Gotta level that playing field out. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.